Chapter 1007. Welcome home. As Jiang Hai's car drove into the small courtyard, Jiang Hai also walked to the front of his villa. He didn't need to open the door. The door of the villa was already opened, and the voice of the cleaning lady sounded in his ear. Huh? Someone's back? Walking into the door, Jiang Hai looked at the shoes on the shoe rack at the door. There was a pair of shoes stained with a lot of mud, and then he asked with some doubts. Yes, Miss Bridget Nelson has returned and is taking a bath. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the cleaning lady said mechanically. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai was a little confused, because it was only about 3:00 in the afternoon. They should be busy at this time. What's going on? Is she on the second floor? Hearing the cleaning lady's words, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. Yes, it's her room on the second floor. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the cleaning lady also replied seriously. Then Jiang Hai changed into slippers and slowly walked upstairs. When he walked to the door of her room upstairs, he found that Bridget Nelson had already taken a bath. At this time, the girl was standing in front of a mirror in her room, drying her hair with a hair dryer. He didn't know if it was to dry, so she only wore a slightly loose sweater, but the sweater couldn't show off her perfect figure. Those two straight snow-white legs, slender waist, and a pair of indescribable breasts made Jiang Hai stiffen slightly to show his respect. Huh? You're back. Why are you sneaking around? You scared me. Maybe it was because Jiang Hai swallowed a little too loudly, which made Bridget Nelson notice Jiang Hai and she couldn't help but blame him. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile a little awkwardly, then walked in from outside. Didn't you go to the town hall for a meeting? Why are you back now? Seeing Jiang Hai come in, Bridget didn't care. In fact, when this girl first came, she was very timid. She almost didn't even talk to Jiang Hai. The first time she was with Jiang Hai, it was Dinah Taylor who pushed her in. She was like a puppet the whole time. She didn't even know how to move. No matter how Jiang Hai positioned her, she would do whatever he told her to do. Usually, she didn't have much of a presence in the villa. But this little girl had become a completely different person. When she first came, Aphrodite was the oldest to earn money at 21 years old. Now she was already 24 years old. Dinah Taylor and Hilda Leonard were both 20 years old and 23 years old this year. Peggy Hall, Sheila Rodney, and Ohilia Clive were all 19 years old and 22 this year. And the youngest, Bridget and Janice Joy, were only 18 years old when they first came, and were now 21 years old. When they first came, they were dirty and thin, their hair was stuck together, there were some scars on their bodies, and their clothes were tattered. Because of long-term malnutrition, their faces were a little thin. To be honest, when Jiang Hai first brought them to the manor, he admitted that he was a saint because he really did not have any desire for them. They were dirty, smelly, and ugly. To be honest, if they were thrown on the set to act as ghosts or zombies, they basically did not need to put on makeup. However, after 3 years of living with Jiang Hai, the nourishment of the spiritual qi, the replenishment of the manor's food, and the changes in these girls, Jiang Hai could see it clearly. In the beginning, when they were with him, they could only be regarded as pretty. Out of 100, they could only score around 70. Now, they could score at least 85. This was a qualitative leap. Because the girls in Jiang Hai's manor usually did not put on makeup, but because of the nourishment of the aura and Jiang Hai's hard work, their skin was quite good. They were basically in the best state. Their skin was white, tender, moist, tight, and shiny. Their hair was also very beautiful, and their faces were always full of smiles. This was their satisfaction with life. Their hearts were full, their lives were full, and with the nourishment of the aura here in Jiang Hai's manor, all the girls in Jiang Hai's manor could score more than 85 out of 100. If they put on makeup, it didn't need to be heavy, a very light kind was enough to make them the center of attention. However, they did not intend to be the center of attention. They were prepared to follow Jiang Hai for the rest of their lives. Seeing Jiang Hai come in, Bridget also pulled Jiang Hai to sit on the bed with one hand, and then she sat beside Jiang Hai. I just went to give a general direction. I'm not a person from the town hall. After lunch, I came back after a while. Why did you come back today? Looking at Bridget beside him, Jiang Hai asked her with a smile. Hey, don't mention it. I was unlucky today. I was going to drain the water, but there was a snake in the drain. I was so scared that I sat down in the drain and dirted my clothes. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bridget said helplessly. She was originally timid, so naturally, she couldn't help being scared. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also looked at her with some surprise. Are you hurt? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also looked at her wrists and ankles. No, it was a non-venomous coastal band snake. When I called, it attracted chirp, and it ate the snake directly. Seeing Jiang Hai staring at her, Bridget blushed and said with a smile. Obviously, she was very happy that Jiang Hai was so concerned about her. Even if Jiang Hai's concern was not only for her, she was also very happy. It's good that you're fine. Do you want to kill a round of snakes? Hearing that she was fine, Jiang Hai also breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, he was thinking about whether there were too many snakes in the manor now. Should he kill a round of snakes? No, I heard from Dulles Gerard and Robbins Garcia that the snakes in our manor are basically non-venomous and harmless to humans. And most importantly, they can eliminate mice, much better than cats. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bridget also said with a smile. Okay then, Hearing Bridget's words, Jiang Hai also knew that snakes eat mice, and the effect is very good. Not only in the United States, but there are also many places in China that use snakes to kill mice. After this topic ended, Jiang Hai couldn't find any other topic for a while. As for Bridget, she just looked at him. Well, you should rest first. You were shocked. If you are tired, you can sleep for a while. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai was ready to leave. What he was most afraid of was that the atmosphere suddenly became awkward. He looked at Bridget Jiang Hai and said with a smile. Then, won't you sleep with me? Hearing that Jiang Hai was leaving, although Bridget was very timid, she had been Jiang Hai's woman for more than a year after all. They had done it hundreds of times during this time, so she was not so shy. She gently stretched out her hand, pulled Jiang Hai's little finger, and said with some hesitation. Looking at her hopeful eyes, Jiang Hai smiled. He was the least afraid of this situation. There was nothing to say at the moment. His body fell, and he pulled Bridget onto her bed. The loose coat was quickly taken off, and Jiang Hai's clothes were also taken off. This is the second time I am alone with you. When the two met, Bridget couldn't help but smile and talk to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but blush. This matter was indeed not easy to talk about. However, Bridget didn't care. She kissed Jiang Hai directly. After the mouth, her tongue went all the way down, neck, chest, lower abdomen. When she was working hard, Jiang Hai also turned her upside down. Looking at some indescribable places like butterflies in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but nod with emotion. He didn't know if it was because of their talent, but the most likely reason was the aura. Although the girls in Jiang Hai's manor had fun with Jiang Hai every day, some of their indescribable places were like foreign educational films stored in the computer. No, it's dirty there. Feeling Jiang Hai's movements, Bridget whispered. I'm using it myself. What's dirty about it? Didn't you just take a shower? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little dumbfounded. That's dirty. I'll serve you. If you want to see, use your fingers. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bridget said with a serious face. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also used his fingers, but soon, he didn't want to use his fingers. He turned Bridget over. Sometimes a battle starts like this. More than an hour passed unknowingly. Jiang Hai also went downstairs, but when he went downstairs, he found that the other people were basically back, and then they looked at Jiang Hai with a smile, but Jiang Hai's face was so thick. He went straight to the kitchen, and while making trouble, he hugged Chia who was cooking and teased there. Remember to leave some food for Bridget later. Looking at Jiang Hai's heartless look, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but smile and say. Compared with Qi Jia and Qia, Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan were closer to the other people in Jiang Hai's manner. Looking at the current situation, Ai Xiaoxi also knew that Bridget probably couldn't come down for dinner. Chapter 1008. On the second day after going to the town hall, Jiang Hai returned to his carefree state. The sea god ceremony was a week later, and it was their business to be busy. It had nothing to do with him. He didn't receive a salary from the town hall. Today's weather was good, so he moved the recliner to the tree in front of his villa. The tree in front of Jiang Hai's villa was originally a maple tree. It was there when he first arrived. In the United States, there were two types of trees that were particularly popular. One was the maple tree, and the other was the oak tree. In North America, there were about the same number of maple trees and oak trees. However, because Canada's national tree was the maple tree, the United States' national tree was the oak tree. Basically, the two types of trees were about the same in both countries. The oak tree was most famous for its fruit. It was a kind of dried fruit. It was very delicious, but it wasn't very common in China. However, it was similar to pine seeds in the United States. It was cheap and delicious. And maple trees are maple syrup. This is something that everyone knows. But because maple trees produce maple syrup, they attract a lot of insects. When Jiang Hai was under the shade of a tree for the first time, he was eaten by a lot of insects. Therefore, he later brought some camphor seeds from China. This kind of thing couldn't be found in the United States. Therefore, Jiang Hai used his spiritual energy to produce camphor. This type of camphor was also planted in China to make mothballs or furniture. Therefore, it grew very quickly. In 2 years, it had grown to more than 3 meters tall last year. Therefore, before last winter, Jiang Hai moved the maple tree to another place. Although it was a big project, Jiang Hai definitely couldn't cut it down. In autumn, Jiang Hai still needed to collect maple syrup from this tree to drink. This year's spring, it was already about 5 meters tall. It was said that this tree could grow to 50 meters. Whether it was true or not, Jiang Hai didn't know, but at least he knew that this tree was very good. Because this tree didn't attract insects, the smell it emitted was very annoying. However, when people smelled it, it had a refreshing effect. After making a cup of Longjing tea, Jiang Hai lay down on the recliner. Then, he enjoyed the breeze, smelled the fragrance of the flowers, and swiped his phone while waiting for lunch. No matter what other people thought, Jiang Hai felt very good. Did he have any rigid needs? No. He lay here every day. According to the $7 billion he earned a year, 365 days a year, that was nearly $20 million a day. He didn't lack money, so it didn't matter how he squandered it. Because of the Dragon Ball and the spiritual energy, his physical fitness was particularly good. He didn't need to exercise, and his body was still as strong as an ox every day. He also didn't have the ambition to open up new territory or save mankind. His social status was also quite high. Not only did he cooperate with many countries, he was also a shareholder of Google. He had a company, money, and status. He really didn't have much to pursue. What did he pursue? To find excitement, to have fun in the car? He didn't like to play. To pick up girls? He had more than 20 in his manor, and he could pull every single one of them over and undress them in any position. Did he need to pick up those young models? There was no need. He really didn't want to play like that. Money, power, status, women. Jiang Hai had everything. What was there for him to strive for? Although only 3 years had passed, Jiang Hai felt as if he had entered a state of retirement in advance, because he really had nothing to do. But to be honest, his life was really good. At least, Jiang Hai really felt good. He lived like this every day, and he didn't get tired of it at all. The only thing he had to do was think about what position to use tonight, or what he wanted to eat. If there were any good movies or the like, he would go watch them with his girlfriends, go out to play, and buy clothes. He didn't lack money. Sometimes, life was so boring, but it was good. If there was something that made him unhappy, it would probably be the children. There were so many women around Shanghai, but in 3 years, none of them had hit the lottery. Jiang Hai could only laugh at this. Jiang Hai glanced at his WeChat friend circle. Those who were showing off their children's existence, Jiang Hai curled his lips. He then closed WeChat and looked at Station 13's Ghost Beast. Recently, Jiang Hai has been very fond of looking at things. Hey, boss, we have trouble. Just as Jiang Hai was browsing the screen, Knursen Peters in the distance came over and said helplessly to Jiang Hai. Trouble? What's the situation? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai frowned. Could it be that someone couldn't stand his leisure and came to find trouble again? Looking at Knursen Peters, Jiang Hai asked very seriously. It's rice has worms. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Knursen Peters couldn't help but say with a horrified face. Ugh. For his words, Jiang Hai didn't know what to say other than, ugh. Rice was definitely going to have worms. But then he thought about it. If there were worms, it would really be troublesome. Let's go and take a look. Hearing what Knursen Peters said, Jiang Hai walked towards the rice field with a teacup. Because Jiang Hai was still doing an experiment, the rice field he opened was not very big, only about 2 mu, about the same size as the tea tree. Although it was the first time he planted it and it was not very straight and standard, after all, there was aura. According to Jiang Hai's estimation, in the winter, he could harvest almost 1,000 kilograms of rice. At least this number should be the minimum. After removing the shell, there are still about 800 kilograms. Of course, if they eat freely, it is definitely not enough for the people in Jiang Hai's manor. If they eat freely, according to the calculation of 1 gene per person per day, it will be more than 3,000 kilograms to eat. But this is the United States. Jiang Hai will still mainly eat meat and flour. Rice will be eaten 2 or 3 times a week. Jiang Hai doesn't care about this, and if the harvest is really good and the taste is good, he can plant more next year. But when he came to the rice field, he couldn't help but frown. Because at this time, there are a lot of worms on the water surface of the rice field. It is not an exaggeration to say that it is a large area. Mosquitoes, water frogs, water scorpions, and so on. Jiang Hai looked at it. This is the world of worms. It rained a few days ago. It seems that these worms have all been rained out. In Huaxia, there is a special festival every year called Tingling, which means that these worms will be startled out, and the rain the day before yesterday obviously made these guys start to reproduce in large numbers. And Jiang Hai's little insect exterminator, the chickens, can't come over because this is a ditch, so he can only let these guys reproduce. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai can't help but scratch his head. It seems to be a little difficult, boss. What should we do? Knursen Peters scratched his head. He really doesn't know what to do. In fact, Jiang Hai was also a bit confused. In a situation like this in the country, the best way was to use medicine. However, Jiang Hai's rice was to be eaten by himself, so it was impossible for him to use medicine. If he didn't use medicine, then he could only use biological control. AI? Biological control? After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai suddenly patted his head, then picked up his mobile phone and looked it up. Soon, a method appeared in front of him: fish farming in rice fields. Fish farming in rice fields is a very common method in Huaxia. Whether it is Jiang Hai's hometown or other places, fish farming in rice fields is very common. First, it is because the fish can eat the worms in the rice field, but it will not have any impact on the rice field. At most, it will eat some of the fallen rice to play the role of insect control. Second, because the fish in the rice field eat worms and rice to live, although its meat may not be as good as the wild fish, it is definitely much better than the fish in the fish pond. Other fish, a catty of fish, may be sold for a few yuan, but rice flour fish may be sold for 12 or 20 yuan per catty. Not only does it plant food, but it also raises fish. The fish feces also fatten the rice. It can be said that it is killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Seeing this, Jiang Hai's eyebrows couldn't help but raise. When he dug this field, because he didn't know much about it, he would rather dig deeper with the principle of digging deeper. Now, it is in line with the initial plan of fish farming in rice fields. Now, it only needs to be modified a little. However, there is a problem with the fry. In China, the fry of sea fish may not be so easy to buy, but the fry of river fish is quite easy to buy. It can even be bought at some farmers' markets. But in the United States, no one eats river fish, they eat sea fish, so there is no market to sell the fry of river fish. But it doesn't matter if there is no market, Jiang Hai can catch it himself. Connor son, let's dig here first, then go fishing. Once he thought of it, he must do it. Jiang Hai's character was like this. Usually, when there is nothing, he will be indifferent. Now that there is something, he will not delay it. Then, together with Knerson Peters, he went to the warehouse, took out shovels and other things, and began to modify the rice field according to the standards of fish farming in rice fields described on the internet. Because there were only 2 acres of land, and because the 2 of them were born with great strength, after dinner and more than an hour of work, the transformation had already been completed. Once the water was released, the water level of the paddy field was still very ideal. But at night, when the lights are turned on, Jiang Hai and the others saw that there are more insects in the rice field. Regarding this, Jiang Hai can only think of solving the fish problem tomorrow. Sea fish is definitely not possible. Salt water can't grow food. So, he can only get river fish. Fortunately, although Winthrop does not sell fry, there is a lot of wild fish here. Tomorrow, Jiang Hai was ready to go to the river to catch some fish. Of course, he couldn't use a fishing net directly, but he was still quite confident in his fishing skills. Don't forget, he was a person who could go to the river to catch wild fish. In Winthrop, it was not a problem. Chapter 1009. The next morning, Jiang Hai and Knerson Peters drove away. They drove straight to a relatively peaceful area near Winthrop, which was not far behind Winthrop High School. In the past, Jiang Hai liked to fish here, but at that time, he was the only one who came here to fish. But today, when he came here, he found that there were more than a dozen people fishing on both sides of the river. Jiang Hai looked around and found that they were all Huaxia people. Basically, they were all uncles in their 40s or 50s. Seeing Jiang Hai coming over to fish, these uncles also glanced at him. Seeing that Jiang Hai knew how to park the car in an open space, they stopped looking at him. After Jiang Hai parked the car, he began to take things out of the car. First, it was a huge bag of fishing equipment. There were fishing rods, fishing lines, fishing hooks, and fishing floats. Some of these things were tied up, and some were prepared for use. Jiang Hai liked fishing, whether it was in the river or in the sea, he was very interested in fishing. Therefore, he has a lot of fishing equipment. He has 8 fishing rods, all of which are made of the best charcoal, and all of them are of various lengths. In this small river, there is no need for fishing rods, so Jiang Hai didn't bring any with him. In addition to these fishing equipment, there were also fish nets, which were also called fish households. There was also a special incubator, because the fish that Jiang Hai caught were not for eating now, but to be taken back to raise. When he went back, there must be water. In addition, there were poles, umbrellas, and 2 small chairs. After everything was set up, Jiang Hai also took out his bait. Generally speaking, the bait used for fishing was some prepared dough like corn flour. But this kind of dough would easily melt in the water, especially in a constantly flowing river. Therefore, in such a river, one would use fake bait or live bait. Fake bait was not easy to catch fish, so Jiang Hai decided to use live bait. As for what it was, Jiang Hai would use live bait. Insects. There was nothing else in Jiang Hai's manner, but there were plenty of insects. His bait was some cabbage worms, earthworms, and clam worms. After everything was set up, Jiang Hai also picked up an earthworm, hung it on the hook, and then directly threw it into the water. He did not set up too many rods, because he knew that one was enough. Jiang Hai's manner was full of spiritual energy, so naturally these insects had some spiritual energy. After putting them into the water, they naturally attracted the attention of the fish. In the eyes of the masters in the distance, Jiang Hai lifted the rod less than a minute after Jiang Hai put it into the water, only saw 2 palm-sized crucian carps hanging on 2 small hooks. Wow, it's a 2-shot cannon. Looking at the 2 fish in front of him, Jiang Hai could not help but smile, then he happily took the 2 fish down. Because Jiang Hai's fish were to be reared, he did not use barbed hooks, so it was easy to take them down. After taking them down, he threw them into the net next to him, and then continued to fish there. The fish on Winthrop's side were very stupid. Because there were very few people fishing for them in the past, and the temptation of Jiang Hai's insects was too great. So even if some fish felt that something was wrong, they would still flock to him. Jiang Hai basically put the bait in the water, and sometimes it took him more than 10 seconds to catch a fish. The longest time was about 2 minutes. Sometimes it was 1 fish, sometimes it was 2. Because he used a short rod and was fishing for crucian carps, the speed was really fast. After sitting here for more than an hour, Jiang Hai had almost caught hundreds of crucian carps. There were 2 masters not far from him. Others could not see how many he had caught, but these 2 knew a little. So one of the masters could not sit still. After collecting the bait, he took the initiative to come to Jiang Hai's side to watch Jiang Hai fishing. "Young man, you're amazing. What bait did you use? Do you have a secret recipe?" Looking at Jiang Hai, the master here watched for a while and found that Jiang Hai had caught a lot more. He still could not hold back. When Jiang Hai caught 2 more crucian carps, he came over with a smile and asked Jiang Hai, "There's no secret recipe. I just used my own earthworms." Hearing the master's words, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the master could not help but scratch his head and look at the worms in Jiang Hai's box. "Your earthworms? You live in a small town?" The worms were all alive and fresh, which meant that they were not brought over from China. Then it could only be that Jiang Hai lived here. "Yes." Jiang Hai did not reveal his identity, but just said with a smile, "Sai, I really envy you for being able to live here. To be honest, this is my first time here, but I've already fallen in love with this place. The air is fresh, the life is leisurely, the expenses are not high, and I have a lot of fun. I've already shortened the visa period from 1 week to 3 months. If I pass, I'll have to live here for at least 2 months before I feel at ease. It's because my family members are still in China, and I still have to collect my pension. Otherwise, I'd be prepared to buy a house here." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the master could not help but sigh. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled and did not answer because there was no way to answer. If he said that it was true, then people would say that he was not patriotic. But if he said that this place was not good, he really couldn't say it. At least in the case of traveling, this place was indeed a good place for leisure travel. After chatting with the master for almost an hour, Jiang Hai also fished for the whole morning. Looking at the fish in the net, there were almost 300, so he was not in a hurry to fish. After telling the master, he took the things and threw them into the car. Then, he returned to his manor with Knursen Peters. Next, it was time to release the fish. But there were also rules when it came to releasing fish. Why were many of the fishes that were caught unable to survive after returning home? There were basically 3 reasons. First, it was related to the temperature difference and the oxygen content. But fortunately, the rice field that Jiang Hai wanted to release was originally water from the river, so there was no need to worry about this problem. Second, it was because of the trauma on the mouth, which was not so easy to recover. Naturally, the fish could not eat and had to die. Third, it was because of the difference in the original water quality. Jiang Hai tried his best to reduce these 3 points, so naturally, the problem was not big. But before putting them into the pond, Jiang Hai deliberately cleaned them one by one. This was because when fishes are frightened, they will produce a kind of mucus on their body. This mucus will affect the breathing of the fishes. Many fishes have suffocated to death because of this. So before Jiang Hai put the fish into the rice field, he washed them very quickly. In less than half an hour, they were all released. Then, Jiang Hai and the others went back to eat. But 300 cushion carps placed in 2 mu of rice field really could not make any waves, so Jiang Hai and the others still had to go back in the afternoon. After having a good lunch at home, Jiang Hai and the others went to the river again in the afternoon. When they came, Jiang Hai found that the master who chatted with him in the morning was still there. It seemed that he had eaten a bite around here for lunch. After all, this was Winthrop High School. Just like how there were many food stalls outside high schools and junior high schools in China, there were also some food stalls outside this high school. Seeing that Jiang Hai came again, he felt that fishing alone was boring, so he came to chat with Jiang Hai again. Fortunately, Jiang Hai did not care. His bait was very strong. No matter what kind of fish it was very difficult to resist. Not to mention that Jiang Hai was just talking. As long as Jiang Hai was not playing gongs and drums, it was fine. In the afternoon, Jiang Hai caught about 300 cushion carps and 50 small carps. There was no other way. There were so many fish in the river, and the big net was almost full. Looking at the sky, it was almost dark. Jiang Hai did not say much and prepared to leave. After all, he had to go back and clean these fish. But before leaving, Jiang Hai gave the rest of his bait to the master. The master chatted with him for the whole day. The bait could not last the night, so he gave it to the master to play with. After receiving Jiang Hai's bait, the master was very happy. After watching Jiang Hai leave, he sat directly on Jiang Hai's fishing position. He was not like Jiang Hai, who fished for the sake of rearing. He fished for the sake of playing and eating. Of course, the bigger the fish, the bigger it would be. So he directly changed to the longest 7.2-meter long rod. After hanging half of a clam silkworm on it, he directly threw it into the water. After the clam silkworm entered the water, it reacted in less than half a minute. The rod directly jumped into the water. Fortunately, the master was quick enough to pull the fishing rod. Unfortunately, even if he pulled the fishing rod, it was useless. The thing in the river was obviously much stronger than him. It did not give him a chance to gain a foothold at all. As soon as the master saw someone fall into the water, the people who were fishing nearby ran over to help. For a moment, the scene was chaotic. When the master came ashore, he saw a big carp about 1.2 meters in the distance. It jumped high on the surface of the water under the setting sun with his fishing rod and then disappeared into the river with the fishing rod. Seeing this scene, everyone here, including the master, laughed. But they had to admit that Jiang Hai's bait was really good. At this time, Jiang Hai did not know that there would be such an episode after he left. At this time, he had already returned to the manor and began to play with his fish. Chapter 10:10. Jiang Hai's bait had a miraculous effect. This rumor quickly spread among the people in Winthrop who liked to fish. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai did not give them much of a chance. There was no other way. Jiang Hai's paddy field was small. According to the domestic standard, a hectare field could only hold 10,000 to 15,000 fish. That was to say, only 15 mu of land could hold these fish. And they were still fry fish. You still had to consider the problem of these fry fish dying. Jiang Hai now had a total of 2 mu of land, and the fish he placed were all adult fish. Naturally, it was impossible for him to place them like fry fish. Therefore, Jiang Hai only fished for a day and a half before returning. On the first day, he caught more than 700 fish. Among them, more than 600 were cushion carps and 100 small carps. The largest one was only a little more than 2 caddies. When placed in the paddy field, it did not look very big. However, the effect was quite good. The fish at night might not have eaten anything when placed in the paddy field, but after the fish at noon were placed in the paddy field, they began to hunt at night. The insects floating in the water were the perfect rations for the cushion carps. The next day, when Jiang Hai went to take a look, the insects that were originally floating in the water had almost disappeared by 1/10. Of course, the insects would continue to grow, but these things would be the best rations for these fish. The next morning, Jiang Hai went to fish again. However, this time, he did not only catch crucian carps and carps. He began to fish for grass roots. Grass roots were actually quite difficult to raise. In order to let these people adapt, Jiang Hai deliberately put a trace of spiritual energy in the bucket containing these fish to ensure that these fish would not die. Of course, it was impossible for Jiang Hai to catch any kind of fish. The fish did not listen to him. When fishing for crucian carps, it was easy to catch carps, not to mention grass carps. Therefore, there were basically all kinds of fish, but there were indeed a lot of grass roots. After catching about 200 miscellaneous fish, Jiang Hai left. However, when he left, naturally, the old man who was close to Jiang Hai for a long time yesterday took the remaining insects in Jiang Hai's hands with a smile. After Jiang Hai left, he could not wait to take out the sea rod that he specially prepared. This time, the old man was prepared to do it for real. Needless to say, this old man was really lucky. When he went back at night, although he was wet all over, he really had a good harvest. He harvested a total of 6 big fish. A 1-meter-long mirror carp was quite eye-catching. In the evening, he specially cooked it and had a good meal with a few acquaintances. Of course, Jiang Hai did not know about this. He just took his fish back to the manor. These fish included grass carps, silver carps, black carps, and 2 small catfish. Jiang Hai directly cleaned up these fish and threw them into the rice field. The effect was still very good. Basically, after resting for an afternoon, these fish began to look for food. On the 3rd day, when Jiang Hai and Knerson Peters went to look again, although there were still insects on the water surface, the number was obviously much less. Basically, there were only half or even 1/3 of the insects that they saw 3 days ago. Of course, Jiang Hai did not have to worry that these fish would eat all the insects. How fast insects hatched, everyone was very clear. Now that it was spring, the insects could not be eaten up. With the success of Jiang Hai's rice field fish farming, he did not have to worry about the insects and the rice field not being fertile. And most importantly, when the water was released in autumn, he estimated that he would harvest a large number of fish. At that time, he would be able to taste the river fish that he raised. Thinking about it, Jiang Hai could not help but smack his lips. After eating too much sea fish, it was not bad to eat river fish occasionally. Thinking about the sweet and sour fish, the braised fish, and the dried fried crucian carp, yes, at that time, he would be able to have a good meal. After solving this matter, Jiang Hai was in a state of decadence again. Mayor Wallace and Jiang Hai notified in advance that the sea god ceremony would be held in 3 days. At that time, Jiang Hai would go 1 day in advance and take a look. If there was anything wrong, they could also change it. During these 2 days, whether Jiang Hai was relaxed or not, it was not up to him. Just like that, Jiang Hai passed another 2 days in a drunken stupor. On this day, he finally did not stay at home because he had said that he would go and take a look. Jiang Hai's position in Winthrop did not need to be explained. Last year, Jiang Hai held the fish tank. This year, Mayor Wallace directly asked him to hold the fish tank from the beginning to the end. He only helped to hold the fish tank when it was time to take it. Jiang Hai did not have much to say about this. Although it was a little tiring, he could still endure this kind of work. Although the fish tank was prettier than the previous years, it was only about 5 kilograms, so it was not a big problem for him. Because the ceremony was tomorrow, Jiang Hai also saw this year's sacrifice, an Atlantic blue dragon. Jiang Hai had also introduced this thing before, so he did not say much about it here. This year's Atlantic blue dragon seemed to be quite big. He had to admit that the fishermen in Winthrop were quite good. One must know that this kind of sea slug was very rare. Now, it was also quite a popular pet internationally. This kind of creature basically only lived in the tropical waters, but it could sometimes be seen in Winthrop, especially in early spring, when this kind of creature would be swept up by the ocean currents. When this kind of creature was in the sea at 13 to 24 degrees, its appetite was quite strong. But if it was below 13 degrees or above 24 degrees, it would not eat anymore. In the sea, it basically lived on the reefs or rolled up into a ball and drifted with the waves. Although this kind of creature looked like a worm, it was an essential and beneficial creature in the sea, because its main food was poisonous jellyfish and purple conch, which was similar to what sea turtles ate. Therefore, in Europe and North America where animal protection organizations were rampant, this kind of creature was relatively common in summer. On the other hand, Yin Guiyang, which should have been more common, was already very rare. They were basically captured and kept as pets. In fact, it was impossible for this kind of creature to go extinct, because this kind of creature was hermaphrodite. It could give birth to children by itself. With such a powerful talent, it was indeed not easy to exterminate it. Holding the glass tank, Jiang Hai, Mayor Wallace, and Shendiclive walked along the path that they were going to take tomorrow. Azalina and the others were not idle. What a joke, Jiang Hai came to the parade. What if he was in danger? There would be a lot of people tomorrow, so the girls who stayed at home for a while began to get busy. Surveillance of various locations, as well as the selection of police officers to protect Jiang Hai and so on, everything was being prepared in an orderly manner. With everyone's discussion, they basically had a plan for tomorrow's situation. Then, another night passed. The next morning, Jiang Hai got up. To be honest, he usually didn't get up so early. But today, they did have something to do. At 6:00 in the morning, they all went out. At this time, Winthrop was just beginning to brighten. Jiang Hai and the others came to the square in the middle of the town. At this time, there were already many people in the square. There were tourists and locals. When they saw Jiang Hai, they all cheered. Of course, the one who cheered the loudest was Jiang Hai. If it weren't for Jiang Hai, this would still be a poor fishing village. As for the tourists, they were more or less confused because most of them didn't know Jiang Hai. Although they heard that there was a very rich Chinese here, there were still too few people who had seen Jiang Hai. Now, when they heard the locals cheering, they cheered and joined in the fun. Amidst the cheers, Jiang Hai also walked up to the high platform. At 7:00, with the sound of 32 cannon salutes, this year's Poseidon Festival officially began. There were no performances, no speeches, and no beating around the bush. When the time came, Mayor Wallace announced the start of this year's Poseidon Festival and directly handed the glass jar to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai also raised the glass jar with the blue dragon in it, then went down the stairs and walked towards their original route to the beach. Along the way, more and more townspeople and tourists joined the parade. In front of the parade, the band organized by Winthrop's school and the children performing were constantly clearing the way. Jiang Hai and the others walked very slowly. The journey that was originally about an hour took them 4 hours to complete. At 11:00 in the morning, they arrived at the release platform by the beach. When Jiang Hai released the blue dragon back into the sea, all the locals cheered. This also meant that the Poseidon Festival had accepted their gift. This year, they would definitely have a good harvest. After releasing the blue dragon, the ceremony and parade actually ended. Then, the crowd gradually dispersed and walked towards the 3 areas that were already planned. Most of the locals went to the stall area because they would trade with each other, trade some old goods, and buy some small toys. Most of the tourists went to the gourmet area and the distant play area to play. Of course, some tourists went to the old goods stalls to see if they could buy anything that they liked. As mentioned earlier, it was very troublesome for Americans to deal with old goods. They couldn't just throw it away casually. If they threw it to the garbage station, they would have to write a note or something. Therefore, they preferred to give these old goods directly to the homeless. However, there weren't many homeless people in Winthrop, so trading with each other was a good choice. After releasing the blue dragon, Jiang Hai wasn't in a hurry to go back. Instead, he went directly to the food stall. Although Jiang Hai's house had all kinds of delicious food, he was still very interested in the street snacks. Chapter 10:11. Americans, or to be exact, Westerners, had a terrifying obsession with food stalls. Of course, more than a quarter of the people who set up food stalls in the United States had their own jobs. They set up food stalls not to earn money, but to have fun and to pass the time. There were many delicious food trucks in the United States. The stall owners were lawyers or civil servants. While they had stable jobs, they were not short of money at all. The reason why they set up food stalls was to kill time, because they liked to cook, and also to satisfy their vanity. However, because the Americans believed that there was no such thing as a free lunch in the world, no matter what the food stalls were for, they would sell them for money. Almost 80% of the food stalls had to pay taxes and were protected by the government. Not only were the Western vendors so supportive, but the Western media was also the same. For example, in Boston and New York, every year, the city's food stalls would be ranked in a highly credible magazine. Even Michelin would give the food stalls a star rating. Those high-end food stalls were even harder to rank than those Western restaurants. Of course, the prices were very affordable. The people in Winthrop were the same. Although they did not have high-end food stalls, the food stalls tasted good. Because of the increasing number of tourists, there were many food stalls in Winthrop. Some were opened by restaurant apprentices, some were opened by housewives, and some were opened by fishermen. But no matter who opened the stalls, they had to go to the town hall to register and pay taxes. Winthrop was very small, so naturally, no one could open a food stall without paying taxes. Even in Winthrop, there were some Chinese people who opened food stalls and sold dumplings. They were quite popular. Of course, there were even more today. When Jiang Hai and the others walked into the food stalls, at a glance, there were at least 30 food stalls. Some of them were trolleys, some were old cars, and some were even broken boats. There were almost no shops that were exactly the same. At a glance, there were also a variety of food. After all, Winthrop has been entertaining tourists for some time now. Therefore, they already have a general idea of the tastes and choices of the tourists. Jiang Hai also has some understanding of this. At a glance, these 30 or so stalls mainly sell 8 kinds of food. The first was corn pancakes, which were basically sold in Mexico. Of course, there were black and white people who sold them, not only Mexicans. The second was barbecue. There were many Middle Eastern immigrants in the United States. First, it was because the people there were very rich. Second, it was because there were wars all year round. It was not a very suitable place to live. So, there were many Arabian barbecue, beef, mutton, chicken, etc. There was no pork here. Third, there were some dishes from India. For example, the meat and pancakes. They tasted pretty good too. In these kinds of fast food restaurants, when you were ordering, the boss would ask you if you wanted spicy food. You have to pay attention to that. If you can't handle spicy food, don't say, yes. You can only say, a little, because India's chili was pretty good. The fourth was some South American food, such as Yazzie love bacon. It tasted very good after being fried or roasted. It was a delicacy that people who like to eat meat can't miss. 5 was American fast food, sandwiches, or hot dogs. He had to admit that these things tasted quite good, and the portions were huge. In China, an authentic hot dog, such as Bai Wei, would cost more than 40 yuan, because it was basically sold in half in China. In the United States, it was sold as a whole. There were large pieces of turkey, cheese, hot dogs, sausages, cream, lettuce, kale, carrots, and so on. There were vegetables, meat, and all kinds of things. Together with ketchup, salad dressing, and so on, it was more likely to be bigger than a whole hot dog in China. The price was about $3, and that was assuming that there were added ingredients. Normally, it would only be about $2. The sixth was egg tarts, cakes, and so on. These things were not only popular in China, but also in the United States and the Western world. Some small cakes were delicious and filling. They also sold some puffs and so on. It was quite good. Number 7 was the seafood stalls. As the saying goes, those who live near the mountains and those who live near the sea eat the sea. Since Winthrop was located by the sea, there was naturally a lot of seafood. The fishermen were good at cooking seafood, such as roasted oysters, scallops, fish, shrimp, and so on. Since they were absolutely fresh, they tasted pretty good. The eighth was dumplings. Yes, dumplings were eaten in China. However, in China, dumplings were usually eaten in restaurants or at home. But in the United States, dumplings were an out-and-out snack. Many Americans liked this food, and there were not many people in China who didn't like dumplings. Therefore, although this snack had not appeared in Winthrop for a long time, it was very popular. Jiang Hai looked around and saw many people in front of the stalls. This was because the quality of the food made by the people here was good. Although the taste was not quite the same, at least they were not scammers. Therefore, in front of every stall, there were many customers waiting. Some were locals, but most of them were tourists. Regardless of whether they were locals or tourists, Jiang Hai could roughly guess where these people came from by the type of food stalls they were gathered in front of. For example, the people in front of the barbecue stall might be from the north. This was because there was a saying in Jiang Hai's hometown, "There is nothing that cannot be solved with a barbecue." If there is, then 2 barbecues will be enough. The people in front of some cake stalls should be tourists from the south. Of course, this was not absolute. If it was before the Indian and Mexican dishes, there should be more tourists from the Hunan and Sichuan provinces because the dishes were very spicy. Of course, these were all Jiang Hai's thoughts. If you really looked at it seriously, you would lose. Just as Jiang Hai was watching the bustling scene and was about to pick something to eat, he saw 2 familiar figures in front of a stall. It was a 4-person stall, 1 man and 3 women. One of the men was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 50s. He was a typical white man with a beard and a big belly. However, his hands were not slow. He was running a seafood stall. The huge oysters were skillfully opened by him and then placed on the electric stove in front of him to roast them. On the other side, there was an iron plate. A middle-aged woman was roasting garlic, and there were 2 young women helping her. Jiang Hai did not know the middle-aged couple, but Jiang Hai was very familiar with the 2 young women. Clive and Karma Cliff. Needless to say, they were their parents. At this time, some people had unknowingly gathered in front of the stall, but there weren't many people. This was because roasting oysters took a lot of time. Usually, they would roast oysters before selling them. Very few people would come here to watch. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai took the initiative to walk over. Seeing Jiang Hai walking over, Karma Cliff couldn't help but waved her hand happily, then motioned to Jiang Hai to sit down. Jiang Hai also came over and sat there, while Clive looked to the side. "Hey, I saw you just now. You really have the temperament of a leader." Looking at Jiang Hai, Karma Cliff said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was a little embarrassed and touched his nose slightly awkwardly. "Hee, is this your stall?" In order to ease the awkwardness, Jiang Hai glanced at the seafood over there and asked with some doubts. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Karma Cliff also said with a smile. "Of course, our stall is the best in Winthrop, no, the best in Boston." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Karma Cliff said with a proud face. Hearing what she said, the 3 people over there couldn't help but laugh. "Well, don't brag about yourself. I have confidence that Winthrop is the best, but I don't dare to say Boston." "Hello, Jiang, I know you. Come, what do you want to eat?" At this time, the fat man walked over and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. Whether it is because of Jiang Hai's status in Winthrop, or because Jiang Hai almost got together with Sh20 Clive, he knows Jiang Hai very well. And Jiang Hai also knows him a little. Although the 2 have never met, they have been friends for a long time. "I'm not too sure." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also looked at the menu over there and said with some confusion. "What we sell here is basically roasted shellfish, mainly oysters and barnacles." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Sh20 Clive's father pointed to the seafood soaked in water in the distance and said to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai glanced at it, then he was a little overwhelmed because he really didn't know what those things were. "You are the owner of a fishery, don't you know these things?" Seeing Jiang Hai's confused look, sh20 Clive's father couldn't help but laugh. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai shrugged. He really didn't know. Come, let me introduce you. Seeing Jiang Hai say that he didn't know, sh20 Clive's father also stood up with a smile. At this time, the electric oven in front of him was almost full of oysters, so he now has some time. Jiang Hai has always been interested in seafood, so he took the initiative to go over. Just like what sh20 Clive's father said, he is a seafood seller. If he can't recognize all these things, then it will be ugly. Chapter 10-12. You should know what this is, right? Seeing that Jiang Hai had come over, Xanthi Clive's father picked up an ugly shellfish and placed it in front of Jiang Hai. He then looked at him with a smile. I know this. It's a gooseneck barnacle. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai nodded. He knew about this thing because he had a lot of these things in his fishery. To be honest, barnacles are very disgusting creatures. They were attached to big reefs. Well, other things would also attach to them, such as the backs of whales and some plastic bottles. As long as it was something, they would attach themselves to it. They were densely packed, which gave people goosebumps. It was very uncomfortable. Jiang Hai had a bit of trypophobia, so he was not interested in these things. Gooseneck barnacles were still barnacles. They were also disgustingly packed together. They were also called dog claw snails, which could be found in China. However, in Europe, it was considered a very good delicacy. Regardless of whether it was roasted, boiled, or even eaten raw, there were many fans. However, Jiang Hai didn't think much of this kind of thing. Whenever he thought about the appearance of this thing, he couldn't eat it. Hearing that Jiang Hai knew about them, sh20 Clive's father smiled and pointed to something next to him. Are these oysters? Well, I really don't know much about oysters. Looking at his father's smile, Jiang Hai smiled awkwardly. He really did not know much about oysters. sh20 Clive's father also smiled after hearing Jiang Hai's words. Oysters take up a lot of reefs. It doesn't matter if you don't know much about them. Come, let me introduce them to you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, sh20 Clive's father fished out an oyster with a big shell that looked like a scallop from the water. This is called high prestige oyster. It's from Ireland. It's a beginner oyster. In French cuisine, oysters are usually served with this kind of oyster. It tastes good and is a perfect match for wine. It's sold individually for $1.20, sh20 Clive's father said seriously as he looked at the oyster in his hand. Jiang Hai also remembered this kind of oyster. Although he was not going to cultivate it now, he had to at least recognize it. This is Fendi Clive oyster. It's from France. This kind of oyster has to survive in salty waters for at least 2 months, so it doesn't have any parasites. It's also the best choice to eat it raw. Also, this kind of oyster has a special characteristic. When it's cultivated, you can add some sweetness to it. It's very popular in Western restaurants all over the world. It's also the top oyster with the highest sales volume. It's priced at $1.90. Seeing that Jiang Hai understood, sh20 Clive's father became interested and continued to introduce his oysters. This kind of oyster looked better than the previous one. This oyster is from the Jersey coast. It's grown in Normandy and is exclusively for the British royal family. Of course, the royal family also wants to sell this oyster. This kind of oyster is very soft, but it's also very crispy. It's the kind of oyster that is very soft when licked or bitten. But if you use too much force, the oyster will break and sweat will splatter. It tastes good and can make people addicted to it like eating potato chips. Of course, this kind of oyster is not as harmful as potato chips. The third kind of oyster was introduced by sh20 Clive's father. It's a small oyster. To be honest, this kind of oyster was similar to the oysters Jiang Hai had in his hometown. Although Bing City was not near the sea, the seafood there was not expensive. Ordinary oysters were 1 yuan per oyster in the night market where they came from. The bigger oysters were 10 yuan per group, and there were 6 oysters in a group. It was really not very expensive. But here, these oysters were very expensive. Also, this is Girardot oyster. It's the king of oysters. It's from France and is recognized as the best oyster in the world. This oyster is sold for $5. After introducing this kind of oyster, Sh20 Clive's father picked up a big oyster and said proudly to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai had heard of this oyster before, because most Western restaurants, especially French restaurants, had this kind of oyster. This kind of oyster could be eaten as a main course. This kind of oyster, the price of an ordinary one, was $3. In Western restaurants, the price of one was $10. Now, Cindy Clive's father was selling it for $5, which was very cheap. Therefore, the people around him were basically all foodies who knew the ropes. Otherwise, like the old Jiang Hai, or his friends, in their hometown, oysters were sold for less than 2 RMB each. But here, they were selling oysters for 35 RMB. Why? You can become a god if you eat it. This was the difference in the sales of luxury ingredients. Then, Shandy Clive's father introduced Jiang Hai to the oyster production areas in the world, as well as their levels. There were 4 kinds of oysters that were recognized as the best. Among them, Vinci Daki or Vinci Clay was the best among the best. Japan's Kumamoto oysters, the biggest of the best, Varan oysters, and Girardot oysters were the best among the best. Of the 4 types of oysters, 3 were from France, and 1 was from Japan. In recent years, the oysters in Australia seem to be a rising star, but for a real chef, the top seafood must live in the cold sea. Because the fish in the tropical sea grew too fast, the meat quality, whether in terms of firmness or sweetness, was worse than the seafood in the cold sea. It could be said that the fish in the cold sea in the north was quality, while the fish in the warm sea near the equator was quantity. Of course, this was not absolute, because there were many precious fish that liked the warm sea and could not be found in the cold sea. Therefore, Jiang Hai and the other fishermen could only laugh at this. After introducing the oysters, Jiang Hai also ordered a few and tasted them. After waiting for a long time, the oysters were roasted. Then, Jiang Hai could not wait to taste them. There were many tourists who were not short of money and were also knowledgeable. Girardot oysters were sold in French restaurants for $10 per oyster, but that was the price in the US and Europe. In China, if you went to a French restaurant to eat the same oysters, if they were not scammed and were really imported from France alive, you should not even think about it. Now that there were $35 per oyster here, you should be able to eat until you are full. Even if it was $35, he would not be willing to eat it. Other oysters were sold for $10. He had to admit that Sh20 Clive's father's seafood tasted really good. He was worthy of being a French chef in the past. Even Jiang Hai secretly gave him a thumbs up. He was really good. After eating the oysters, Jiang Hai paid the money and then left. He went to other stalls and ate some rolls, skewers, and the like. After filling his stomach, he left the stall area contentedly. Then, he walked to the trading area. When he passed by the amusement area, he found that the tourists and the locals were really happy. Because it was still early spring, the sea was still very cold, so no one went swimming in the sea. However, there were many people who played water sports such as motorcycles. Jiang Hai did not like to play on motorboats, nor did he like to ride motorcycles, so he just looked around. Then, he went straight to the trading area. Jiang Hai was still very familiar with the trading area. After all, he had been here a lot in the past few years. In the trading area, there were a lot of things for sale. There were all kinds of things, from big cars, fishing boats, household appliances, wardrobes, and even small things like mobile phones, computers, bed sheets, and quilts. There were all kinds of things. It was really a wide variety. As long as you wanted to, you could look for it here. Except for your wife, you should be able to find everything else. Although Jiang Hai didn't lack anything, he still liked to wander around here. The trading volume here was quite good. As soon as Jiang Hai walked in, he saw a lot of people haggling over prices. Here, you can buy things with money or barter. There was no clear price, everything depended on one's own guess. To be honest, there were a lot of things that were quite good. For example, after Jiang Hai came over, he saw many young tourists buying things they liked here. Some game consoles, some skateboards, basketballs, and so on. There were also some middle-aged tourists who would buy some medals, coins, and even some bullets and gun barrels that could no longer be used. There were all kinds of things. Jiang Hai saw it was quite lively. However, after a simple look, Jiang Hai did not find anything that he was interested in. Just as he was considering whether to go back to sleep, he saw a stall in the distance. There were many people around. Most of them were children, and some were adults. These people were all there with surprised faces. To be honest, Jiang Hai was also a little curious, so he walked over. However, when he walked here, he found a sign that said, Stray Pet Center. With his height, Jiang Hai looked inside. Then he saw another person, Domenica Ceci. Perhaps no one remembered who she was, but when it came to this person's identity, it was estimated that everyone would have some impression. She was the little sister of the Stray Pet Center, but now she was the person in charge. At this time, there were many cages around her. There were cats and dogs in the cages. Today, she came to find owners for these guys. Of course, she was not selling pets, but recommending people to adopt. In the United States, there were no dog dealers who would sell dogs on the street. Chapter 1013. What's wrong? The Stray Pet Center can't continue? Looking at Dominique Ceci, Jiang Hai smiled, then squeezed into the crowd and said to her with a smile, but she only rolled her eyes in response. Haha. Jiang Hai smiled, then squeezed into the crowd. Your manner can't continue, but I won't stop either. My place is the only stray pet center in Winthrop, and it is supported by the Federation. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Domenica Ceci couldn't help but raise her head proudly and say to Jiang Hai. Hee, then why are you giving away pets on the street? Jiang Hai listened to Dominica's words and squatted down, looking at the pets she prepared here. He has to admit that there are a lot of pets, and there are many kinds of pets. Jiang Hai glanced at them. In addition to the known cats and dogs, there are hamsters, parrots, some other birds, and even more expensive breeds such as chinchillas. Of course, many dogs were originally very expensive. This made Jiang Hai feel that these people are really generous. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Dominica also squatted down. After all, the space in the pet center is limited. There are some old, disabled, and mentally ill pets. We will take care of them in their old age, but there are some pets in good physical condition, in the prime of life, or in young age. Maybe because they were abandoned, or the owner died and moved away, we encourage the public to adopt some every year. It is to reduce our burden and make people like these small animals more. After Domenica Ceci finished speaking, she picked up a Labrador that looked young and rubbed its little head in her arms. This dog is also very close to people and always wants to lick her. Are there any requirements for adoption? Seeing that these dogs are really cute, some onlookers couldn't help but ask. One had to know that many of these tourists had brought along the elderly and children to play. These two kinds of people have very low resistance to cute things like puppies, kittens, and the most important thing is that adoption here is free. In China, a purebred Labrador is sold for at least a few thousand yuan. Although the people who come here to play are not short of this money, who will refuse a free lunch? Tourists can't adopt, only local people with stable income can adopt, sorry. But unfortunately, Domenica Ceci directly cut off the idea of these tourists. They are not dog dealers. After selling the dogs, no one cares about what happens to the dogs. They are stray pet centers. After these pets are sent out, they will schedule a home visit and ask about their living environment at home, whether they are loved, whether they are abused, etc. It is not right to say that they are dog fans. They should be pet fans, they don't like those things. Oh. Hearing Domenica Ceci's words, many tourists softly said, oh. It seems that these pets can't be taken back, and the locals just watched and thought about it. To be honest, many locals don't like to raise these things, because in the past, Winthrop was very poor. They didn't have the money to buy dog food, canned meat, and so on for these cats and dogs. It was troublesome for them to eat by themselves. Although dog food and canned meat are very cheap in the United States, it still costs US dollars. Yes, there is a common sense in the United States, that is, to buy canned meat when feeding pets. It is really extravagant. In the supermarket, a 1 kilogram can of minced meat costs $1. An adult dog needs to eat 2 boxes a day, which is $60 a month for canned meat. This doesn't include the cost of dog food. For the people of Winthrop in the past, it may be a burden, but now that the people of Winthrop have some money, it is not a problem for them to raise a dog. But they still have to think about it, because to some extent, it is like importing a pet. Jiang Hai ignored these people at this time. He was still looking there. After looking for a long time, he couldn't help but look at Domenicasesi. Where is that bear? I still want to raise a bear to play with. Don't even think about it. That bear has hurt people. It can only live in the pet center for the rest of its life. It can't even enter the zoo. And most importantly, it is a protected animal under the Washington Convention. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Domenicasesi rolled her eyes at him, then said with a serious face. She will not break the law to help Jiang Hai get wild animals. TSK, don't talk about that useless thing. If protected animals are not allowed to be adopted, then what's the matter with that tortoise of yours? After Jiang Hai heard her words, he couldn't help but smile, then pointed to a cage at the bottom. The cage was particularly large, about 2 meters long and 2 meters wide. It was at the bottom, and inside the cage was a huge tortoise. The tortoise looked to be about 1 meter long. At this moment, it was very indifferently lying there and playing with the sand. Oh, you are talking about it. If you want to adopt it, you can also raise it. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Domenicasesi also looked at the big tortoise, and couldn't help but smile. Don't talk about useless things, do you think I don't know? Elephant tortoises are protected animals, especially such a big one. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai raised his eyebrows, then said with a serious face, but Dominica only looked at him with disdain. You really don't know. Indeed, most elephant tortoises are protected species, but there are also non-protected species. Elephant tortoises are divided into small elephant tortoises and large elephant tortoises. Among them, there are 4 types of large elephant tortoises, 7 types of small elephant tortoises, and 1 type is extinct. Among them, the small yellow-legged elephant tortoise, the Indian star tortoise, and the Burmese star tortoise can all be artificially bred and are legal pets. Among the large elephant tortoises, the Ongloka elephant tortoise, Sucata tortoise, and the largest Galapagos elephant tortoise are all protected and are not allowed to be raised privately. But this little guy is the Arabella elephant tortoise, a level 2 protected animal, not a protected animal. It can be bought through normal tax commercial sales. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Domenicasesi also introduced it to Jiang Hai eloquently, but to be honest, after listening to her for a long time, Jiang Hai almost didn't understand what she was talking about. He just knew that this elephant tortoise can be adopted, and it's not illegal. This made him a little interested. What does this thing eat? Looking at this big tortoise, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. It eats everything, vegetables, fruits, grass, meat, fish, whatever you have, it will eat. Shrugging, for Domenicasesi, this thing is quite easy to raise except for taking up space. Then can I adopt it? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai's eyes lit up. In his opinion, raising a tortoise seems to be a good idea. Of course, you can be our richest man here. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Domenicasesi smiled, and then said to Jiang Hai. The next thing was much easier. After Jiang Hai filled in a form, under the envious eyes of everyone, he called Edouard Anderson and the others who came to watch the fun and moved this big guy into an F-750 they drove here. Then Jiang Hai stopped shopping and gave his car key to Azalina and asked her to drive it back in the evening. Then he drove the F-750 back to the manor. In the manor, Jiang Hai's huge strength manifested. He moved this guy down by himself, then opened the iron cage and let this guy in. This Arabella tortoise is basically an adult, but it is only an adult because the average lifespan of this kind of tortoise can live up to 200 years. According to Domenica Sessi, this tortoise is 20 years old this year, which is about 10 years in human life. Its original owners were an old couple in Boston. The tortoise tortured the old man and the old woman away, and the children didn't want to raise it, so they sent it to the Stray Pet Center in Boston and then sent it here. However, although it is not an adult, it has lived for 20 years and has some wisdom. It knows that the grass outside is very good, so it slowly climbed out and began to eat the grass in front of Jiang Hai. After eating a few mouthfuls, it raised its head and looked at Jiang Hai curiously. It may not have an owner in its mind, but it knows that it is going to live with Jiang Hai. From today onwards, this is your home. I won't use a cage to encircle you. Now, I'll take you to see the location of your home. Jiang Hai looked at this guy, slowly stretched out his hand, and transferred some spiritual energy to it. Then, he held this huge tortoise and began to walk around his home. He doesn't know if it's because of the spiritual energy or because this tortoise is really smart. It didn't shrink into its shell, but it walked with Jiang Hai. It has been looking at where its home is and where it can play. After walking around, including the forest, Jiang Hai put it down. Looking at its reaction, it was clear that it was interested in the grassland and the surroundings of the freshwater river. This kind of tortoise usually lived in the forest. But now, there were 3 giant beasts in the forest. One must know that this tortoise was adopted, so Dominique and the others would definitely come to see it. If they saw the 3 giant beasts, then it would be troublesome. So Jiang Hai can only raise it in the house. Fortunately, it is also very interested in the camphor trees planted by Jiang Hai. You will be a member of the family in the future, but what is your name? Looking at the big tortoise that began to eat grass again after putting it down, Jiang Hai touched his chin and began to study it. His naming soul is stirring again. Chapter 10:14. Spring is the most comfortable day, it's neither cold nor hot. The breeze blew, bringing with it the scent of new grass and the fragrance of the earth, constantly reverberating in Jiang Hai's manner. At this time, Jiang Hai was also lying on his recliner. On the small table in front of him, there was an iPad playing a popular TV series called Ghost Blows Out the Light or something. To be honest, Jiang Hai has read some of the original novel before, but because it mainly described a story from more than 30 years ago, Jiang Hai's immersion was relatively poor, so he couldn't remember the plot clearly. But it's still good to watch the TV series now. This TV series was already broadcast in China, but because Jiang Hai doesn't like to watch TV series, he likes to watch them all in one go, including American TV series. That's why he's watching it now. While watching the TV series, he drank tea and enjoyed the breeze. Nothing is better than his current life, at least that's what he thinks. Unknowingly, 5 days have passed since the Poseidon festival. At present, whether it's Winthrop or his manor, everything has already returned to normal. Some people are herding cows, some are fishing, some are planting grapes, some are planting vegetables, and some are relaxing. Jiang Hai is the only one who likes the current situation very much. I've salvaged a lot of sunken ships, but I've never seen an ancient tomb before, tsk. While watching the TV series in front of him, Jiang Hai muttered softly. But just as he was muttering, the Google glasses he was wearing vibrated. Incoming phone call, number. After the glasses vibrated, a projection appeared in front of Jiang Hai. There was a string of phone numbers and a photo. Jiang Hai knows this photo, it's Taraga. Didn't she go to school? Why is she calling me? Although a little puzzled, Jiang Hai still pressed the answer button. Hello, Taraga, what's the matter? After the phone was connected, Jiang Hai asked Taraga on the other side. Hey, Jiang, do you have time now? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Taraga's voice also sounded on the other side, and then he said to Jiang Hai hesitantly. Jiang Hai also heard some crying from the other side of the phone. What's the situation? Hearing someone crying, Jiang Hai immediately sat up. Although nothing had happened between him and Taraga, don't forget that Taraga was living with him. He was extremely protective. Let our teacher talk to you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Taraga handed the phone to another person. Hello, is this Mr. Jiang? Hello, my name is Mary Jane, I'm Taraga's teacher. If you have time, can you come to school? Then a woman with a slightly steady voice said to Jiang Hai. Oh, hello, Miss Jane, what happened? For this teacher, Jiang Hai still has some impression. She is a female teacher in her 50s who has been teaching in Winthrop for more than 20 years. She is very respected in town and is also a strong candidate for the next principal of Mary Jane's school. Jiang Hai sent Taraga to high school. Without Jiang Hai saying anything, the school had to arrange the best class and teachers for her, so Jiang Hai was very relieved that Taraga was studying in the school. That Taraga beat someone in school, and he may have beaten someone a little hard. The other party's parents want to talk to you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mary Jane also sighed helplessly and said to Jiang Hai. Huh. Okay, I'll be there right away. Hearing Mary Jane's words, Jiang Hai raised his eyebrows and then sat up from the chair. After hanging up the phone, he went straight to the room to get the car keys. While he was at it, he kicked Little White, who was circling around Long Thigh. Long Thigh was the tortoise that Jiang Hai brought back. Jiang Hai's name was so domineering, in fact, he also named it according to Huaxia's habit. Huaxia people believed that what was lacking should be in the name. For example, Jiang Hai lacked the 5 elements, so he was called Hai. If the 5 elements lacked the 5 elements, then he was called Sharp. If the 5 elements lacked the 5 elements, then he was called Forest or Forest. If the 5 elements lacked the 5 elements, then he was called Yen or Yen. If the 5 elements lacked the 5 elements, then he was called Tuesday. This was why some people called it Run, and some called it Two. This tortoise's biggest characteristic was that its legs were very short, so it was called Long Legs. It was reasonable to hope that its legs were longer. Although it had only been here for less than 5 days, it was obviously used to Jiang Hai's home. There was nothing to be unaccustomed to. After it came, it was treated well. Jiang Hai planted fresh vegetables that had just grown. Jiang Hai had not eaten them yet, but it had eaten them first. There was pasture with spiritual energy, and the water was cold underground spring water. At least it was much better to live here than in the stray pet center or the zoo. The only bad thing was that it might be alone, without a companion. As for Jiang Hai's home, the original creatures had different opinions about the tortoise's arrival. For example, the boss of Jiang Hai's land pets, Little Yellow, which was the green wolf mastiff, had an indifferent attitude. Ever since Chirpy could fly, it was basically impossible to see it during the day. Unless it was raining outside, no one would know where it went. However, it would always come back at night. Occasionally, it would bring some game, such as rabbits, for Jiang Hai and the others. White Hair was the Greenland seal adopted by Jiang Hai. It had now grown a little bigger. Basically, Jiang Hai's swimming pool was its territory. Of course, in addition to it, the 2 guinea pigs that Jiang Hai gave to Delina and Marion had also grown a little. They played with White Hair all day long. After Long Legs came, the most excited ones were probably Bucktooth and Xiao Bai. As for Xiao Bai, it was quite enthusiastic about it. Sometimes, Jiang Hai also wondered if the Caucasian's IQ was also a little low. Otherwise, why would it look so stupid? In line with the principle of kicking a dog that passes by, Jiang Hai kicked Xiao Bai's butt and drove away from the manor. In Boston, Jiang Hai's safety could be guaranteed, let alone in Winthrop. Driving, Jiang Hai entered the town of Winthrop and soon arrived in front of Winthrop's high school. After parking the car in the parking position, Jiang Hai greeted the guard and walked into the high school. In Winthrop schools, whether it was elementary school, junior high school, or high school, non-school staff were absolutely prohibited from entering. For example, when Jiang Hai went to Shendy Clive, he was also stopped by the guard outside for a while. The reason why Jiang Hai could enter was mainly because teacher Mary Jane had already greeted him. After entering the school, Jiang Hai walked straight to teacher Mary Jane's office. But when he was about to walk in, he found that the situation seemed to be a bit wrong. After walking in, he found that in this small office, there were many people standing at this time. There were both men and women. Basically, they were a pair of parents or a parent, standing there comforting a girl or a boy. These people's faces were more or less bruised, and their school uniforms were also in a mess. Taraga was standing there alone at this time. Next to her were her two good friends, Pell Selzy and Bessie Oliver, who Jiang Hai had seen before. Next to them were their parents. The two girls were also a bit embarrassed at this time. Bessie Oliver's hair was messy, and there was a bruise on her face. As for Pell Selzy, well, it was hard to tell. Taraga at this time was like a brave warrior who had won a battle. She proudly raised her head and looked at the people over there. Until she saw Jiang Hai, she lowered her head. As for Mary Jane, who had been paying attention to her, when she saw her movements, she knew that Jiang Hai had come, so she turned her head and nodded to Jiang Hai with a smile. "Hello, Miss Jane. What's the situation here?" Seeing that he had been discovered, Jiang Hai also walked in generously. He looked at Mary Jane and the people over there with some doubts. When they saw Jiang Hai, many of the townspeople here obviously looked unfriendly, but some people smiled and nodded. It seemed that they still respected Jiang Hai very much. "Now that everyone is here, let the children say it." Seeing that Jiang Hai had also come, Mary Jane also spoke. "It's that bitch. She seduced George. George is Horace's boyfriend." As Mary Jane's voice fell, a white girl with a black eye who was beaten pointed angrily at Bessie Oliver over there. "Bah, who would like him? He took the initiative to come to me. You are slandering me." Bessie Oliver here was not polite. He pointed at the crowd over there and said loudly, and the boy's face was quite embarrassed. "You? George will like you. You are kidding. If you didn't use a cheap trick, he would go to you." Hearing Bessie Oliver's words, a tall girl screamed at this time, but at this time, she was the most miserable. Her face was gray, her hair was messy, there was blood under her nose, and there was an obvious palm print on her face. "That's right, don't you see what my daughter looks like? What kind of trash are you? As long as this kid's eyes are not blind, will he give up my daughter for you? My poor daughter, being beaten up like this by these lowly people, this matter is not over." After the tall girl finished screaming, a middle-aged woman dressed very coquettishly next to her shook her chin proudly and said. Next to her was a middle-aged man with a bulging belly, looking at these people with an unfriendly face. Chapter 10:15. Wait, just now teacher Mary Jane said that it was for children, right? Are you a child? Are you in the same generation as them? Are you their classmate? You have been repeating for 40 years, classmate. Hearing the woman's words, Jiang Hai waved his hand, looked at the woman with a smile, and said unhappily. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Taraga and the others couldn't help but want to laugh, and the woman's face turned blue because of Jiang Hai's words. She may have rarely heard such words. What kind of manners are you? Maybe she knew that there was indeed a problem with her interruption just now. The woman raised her head and said with a proud face. Really, what kind of manners are you? You don't have any manners, you can continue. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also said disdainfully, and then said to the others. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the woman's face became more ugly. After being beaten up by Jiang Hai, these people looked at each other and didn't know what to say. But a few days ago, Giorgetti found Bessie and said that he fell in love with her at first sight. He wanted to pursue her, but at that time, I asked her to help me pick tea leaves. Bessie knew that only girls who had never made friends with the opposite sex could help you pick tea leaves, so when she came back, she rejected him. But he didn't give up. When we were having lunch today, he came over to confess his love again. Later, Horace Clark and these girls came to the toilet to block us. We were in the middle of a fight when this guy came over and took sides. I couldn't stand it, so I beat him up too. Seeing that the scene suddenly became quiet, Taraga stood up and told Jiang Hai the situation. It's obvious that she seduced George. How did it become that George likes her? George and I are very close. Hearing Taraga's words, Horace Clark also said loudly, but just after she finished speaking, Jiang Hai waved his hand. I don't care who this Xiao Bai likes, he likes whoever he likes, it has nothing to do with me. Did you block them? Who started it? Looking at these people, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. Sure enough, after hearing Jiang Hai's words, these people stopped talking. There are a total of 7 people in Horace Clark's group over there, plus George Eddy who tried to stop them. There are 8 of them, and Taraga's group has a total of 3 people. 3 people dare to fight against 8 people? No one is stupid. How can this be unrelated? George, tell me, did she seduce you? Hearing that Jiang Hai wanted to settle this matter so quickly, several girls couldn't stand it anymore. Horace Clark pulled the sleeve of George Eddy next to her and said loudly. George Eddy dodged a little, thought for a while, looked at Bei Shi again, and then nodded vigorously. You see, George said that she seduced him, what else do you have to say now? Seeing George Eddy nodding, Horace Clark also seemed to have won a victory and said loudly. Are you crazy? Little girl? You didn't understand what I said just now. Even if it was Bessie who seduced this guy named George of yours, does that mean you can hit her? You've got your priorities wrong. Glancing at Horace Clark with a smile, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Horace Clark couldn't help but be speechless. Now it's my daughter who was beaten up. Look at this delicate little face, what is it now? My daughter is going to participate in a beauty contest, she has a bright future. If you beat her now, the United States may lose a big star, an excellent singer, and a supermodel in the future. Seeing that his daughter was speechless, her father couldn't help but stand up. There was no way. He knew that his wife was good at pestering, but she might not be the opponent of the man in front of her. So he had to stand up and explain. However, his superior words made Jiang Hai smile. Hey, you're really shameless. Okay, I beat your daughter, right? Okay, tell me, do you want to go to the judicial system or what? Looking at this guy, Jiang Hai said calmly, then signaled Taraga and the others not to worry. Letting them go to jail like this is too easy for them. Pay up. Seeing Jiang Hai say this, he thought that Jiang Hai gave in and said proudly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also nodded. Okay, how much do you want? Looking at this man, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. 100,000. After thinking about it, this man also opened his mouth and directly called out a number. Okay. Originally, he thought that he would ask for a sky-high price, but he didn't expect Jiang Hai to answer so straightforwardly. Seeing this, the man's wife couldn't help but gently pull his sleeve. Cough, I'm talking about medical expenses, and mental damage compensation, also 100,000. Seeing his wife pulling his sleeve, the man immediately changed his words and said with a serious face. 100,000 became 200,000. No problem, by the way, what do you do for a living? Hearing 200,000, Jiang Hai also nodded, no problem. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, several people here were a little moved, and the parents of the girls who were beaten were also a little moved. I'm an actuary supervisor. Hearing Jiang Hai ask about his job, the man said proudly. Okay, you want 200,000, okay, I'll give it to you. An actuary's annual income is about $90,000. Since you're a supervisor, I'll double it for you. 180,000, let's call it 200,000. I'll give you 200,000 now, equivalent to your annual income. Jiang Hai looked at this man and nodded. He directly took out a checkbook, wrote a check for $200,000, and handed it over. The man didn't hesitate and directly took it, then looked at his wife and daughter proudly. The parents of the other girls were now a little hesitant to stand up, but before they could stand up, Jiang Hai had already continued. I don't believe that when Taraga beat your child didn't fight back. Now my child is dizzy and can't raise her hand. This is a concussion. There's nothing to say. Your family's matter is settled. Now pay the money. Looking at the man in front of him, Jiang Hai said very calmly. As he spoke, he motioned for Taraga to do as he said. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Taraga directly sat on the chair over there, rubbing his head and complaining that he was dizzy. As soon as they saw Taraga do this, the parents who wanted money instantly stopped and looked at the current situation. You scoundrel, you still want money? Hearing Jiang Hai directly take back the chess piece, the person who was very proud of himself couldn't help but tremble, and then he looked at Jiang Hai with a face of surprise. Jiang Hai sneered. Was his money so easy to take? Of course I want money. The children fought and hurt each other, and it was your child who started it first. I paid for your medical expenses, so you have to pay me back. We have to be reasonable, right? Otherwise, I'll go to the judicial system and let your girl stay in jail for a few years. Looking at this person, Jiang Hai said very calmly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the person couldn't help but be speechless. He couldn't really let his girl go to jail, could he? Fine, you win. He took out the check of $200,000 that he originally put in his pocket. He really was a little reluctant, but he knew that now wasn't the time to hesitate, so he directly threw it on the ground in front of Jiang Hai. Wait, this isn't enough. I like to be reasonable. I paid you a year's worth of income, and you took the money. Now, you have to pay me a year's worth of income, and we're even. However, Jiang Hai didn't have the leisure to pick up $200,000. He smiled and said slowly. Was this matter so easy to solve? He was thinking too much. What do you do for a living? How much do you want? Hearing Jiang Hai say that $200,000 wasn't enough, the person's heart skipped a beat. Then, he raised his head and said angrily, I'm a farmer and cattle breeder. I have a manor in Winthrop, the Soaring Dragon Manor. I think a lot of people here know that I have this manor. You can go to the tax bureau to check. I didn't make a lot of money last year, $7 billion. I'm talking about dollars. Today, you take out $7 billion and slap it on the table, and we'll call it quits. If you can't, I'll sue your girl and make her go to jail. Believe me, I can take out $100 million to do this. I've done it before. Looking at the person's anger, Jiang Hai stood up with a chuckle. The more he spoke, the brighter his face became. When Jiang Hai finished, the face of the family in front of him was quite good. It was hard to find someone with such a pale face. The guy's daughter burst into tears. She was in high school, and she wasn't stupid. She knew what $7 billion meant. If what Jiang Hai said was true, she would really go to jail. Once she came out, her life would be ruined. The woman on the other side also looked at Jiang Hai in surprise, trembling all over. As for the man, he didn't know what to say. Now, his mind was blank, and he didn't know what to do at all. Do any of you want to pay compensation? Seeing that the family was about to go crazy from fear, Jiang Hai turned his head and looked at the other people in the distance and said indifferently. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, these people smiled awkwardly, especially those who were greedy just now. Now, they were laughing very happily. This really saved them from being ruined. If no one wants to pay compensation, then we'll go. Oh right, remember, get 7 billion ready, or wait for the court summons. Seeing that these people were so obedient, Jiang Hai didn't say anything. He stood up and chuckled. Chapter 10:16. Mr. Jiang, please wait a moment. Just as Jiang Hai was about to leave the school with Taraga, teacher Mary Jane walked out from behind. Seeing Jiang Hai stop, she couldn't help but smile. Mr. Jiang, I wonder if you are dissatisfied with our school? Seeing Jiang Hai stop, Mary Jane looked at Jiang Hai and said very seriously. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai scratched his head. Where did this come from? No, I'm quite satisfied with your school. Although something like this happened today, to be honest, Jiang Hai still appreciated the actions of this high school. After all, school violence was inevitable and existed everywhere. Jiang Hai was also bullied when he was in school and robbed of money. At first, he would fight with the robbers, but later, he realized that he couldn't beat them, so he chickened out. Not only the senior students, but there were also bad guys in his class. They said they were borrowing money, but in fact, they were robbing money. It was useless to tell this to the teacher or parents. If he told the teacher would at most come and give him a scolding. It wouldn't hurt or itch. Even if he went to his parents, it would be useless. If this kind of person could be controlled by his parents, then he wouldn't do this. As long as he had some family education, such a thing wouldn't happen. At that time, the school would at most issue a notice of criticism, stay in school for investigation, and so on. Basically, it was useless. Basically, the biggest possibility was that he would be expelled. However, these students had no choice but to study. It would be better if they were expelled. At that time, they would still come to the school every day. You can control the school inside, but can you control the outside? These people were all minors. Who could do anything? And if you called the police, then you should prepare to transfer schools, because you would be isolated by the teachers and classmates in school. Because if you made a big deal out of it, it would be a disgrace to the school and a slap to the teacher's face. In the teacher's view, it didn't matter if you were bullied. This was called an internal conflict. If you called the police, then it would be a big deal. It was precisely because of the education problem in China that school violence was much more common in China. At most, it would be reduced to a small matter, and a small matter would be ignored. This was the reality. Of course, Jiang Hai didn't say that school violence didn't exist in the United States. Naturally, it existed in the United States, but because the management was quite strict, it was easier to control the incidents, especially for some college students and adult high school students. They could really go to jail, just like the popular abuse case in California a few years ago. The person who just watched from the side and handed a pair of scissors was sentenced to 6 years. The main culprit was directly sentenced to 13 years. In China, the saying, "he was just a child," did not apply in the United States, especially in high schools and universities. If two male students fought one-on-one, there might not be any problems because they wouldn't talk about it. It was also embarrassing if they lost. But as long as it was a gang fight or a siege, the American police would never be soft-hearted when arresting people. Therefore, Jiang Hai was quite assured that Taraga would go to school here. Moreover, the situation in this school was better. Originally, this school had some reputation in the Boston area. No, it could be said that it was in the Massachusetts area. The teaching quality was quite good. Although it couldn't be compared to some private schools, after all, the main students in this school were Winthrop residents. Originally, the school was a bit shabby, but there weren't many troublemakers. The admission rate every year was quite good. Maybe because it was in the Boston area, there were many people who were admitted to Harvard, Boston University, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and other high-level universities in Winthrop High. The learning atmosphere was quite good. In the United States, it was basically the same as the current primary and junior high schools in China. It was divided into districts, but in the United States, it was very open. Even if you rented a house nearby, you could still go to school here. Originally, Winthrop High School's teaching quality was good, but the facilities were too poor, so parents were not willing to send their children to suffer here. But since Jiang Hai started to donate money and pay taxes, this school also received a lot of money. Last year alone, the town hall gave them $2 million to support education. Jiang Hai also donated a new library and a new stadium, and the entire school was reorganized. In the summer of last year, Winthrop High School became the best public high school in Massachusetts in one fell swoop. It may be worse than some of the private high schools of the aristocracy. But among the public high schools, it was definitely the best. Therefore, the people who came to school were not only people from Winthrop, but also people who lived in the Boston area would send their children to school. The family just now should be from Boston. Otherwise, they would have recognized Jiang Hai. It's class time now. Miss Taraga isn't going to class. Where are you taking her? Looking at Jiang Hai, Mary Jane said with a smile. She knew that Jiang Hai was a big customer of the school and could not be offended. Oh, then you go to class first. Originally, Jiang Hai thought that after this incident, Taraga should not be allowed to go to class today. After all, when he fought with his classmates when he was young, his father would take him away directly after the fight. The tradition of the old Jiang family was that one would not be reprimanded for fighting. If one won, there would be a reward, and if one lost, they would go back to practice hard. Jiang Hai was like this when he was young. Okay. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Taraga also nodded, then walked towards the classroom. Mr. Jiang, I know you like Miss Taraga very much, but she may have some problems. Seeing Taraga's figure disappear, Mary Jane could not help but turn her head and say to Jiang Hai. Just because of the fight? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai frowned. If she asked him to stay here just to talk about this, then he would have to reevaluate this school. It's not right to scold him for fighting on both sides. Of course not, haven't you already dealt with the fight? I'm talking about Miss Taraga's inner problems. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mary Jane also said briskly, and then looked at Jiang Hai calmly. Inner problems? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai frowned. It's good that it's not about the fight, but what's wrong with her inner problems? Miss Taraga is a little too antisocial. She never participates in any class activities, parties, or clubs in the school. She only lives in her own small circle every day. When she came to school, I found this problem, but because I saw that she made 2 friends, but now she's still like this. Thinking about Taraga's problem, Mary Jane said with a helpless face. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was also stunned. Is it wrong? Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai asked very seriously. God knows how much effort his parents spent to make him become such a person when he was in high school. He cannot make friends, but he must go home after school. Playing basketball and playing on the computer will affect his studies and will become bad. If he participates in class activities, he will have to spend money. It's best if he doesn't participate. It saves a lot of money at home. Although Jiang Hai didn't educate Taraga in this way, to be honest, he didn't think there was anything wrong with this. Of course that's not right. Children have to have a child side. They have to be lively, sunny, and know how to communicate with others. In the future, when they go to college or enter society, they naturally need to talk with others, not be a yes man. They have to have their own independent thoughts. You can't let her practice these things after she enters society. She has to have a certain amount of contact when she's in school. Hearing Jiang Hai's matter-of-fact words, Mary Jane was stunned and said with a serious face. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smacked his teeth. The education methods of the United States and Xia are completely different. Jiang Hai was a little embarrassed, but his sixth sense told him that he was in the United States now, so he should listen to the other party. What should I do? However, on the surface of embarrassment, Jiang Hai quickly pressed it down and asked Teacher Mary Jane seriously. You should think of a way to have a heart-to-heart talk with her or cultivate her self-confidence. The reason why she's like this now is very likely because she has just come into contact with this society. You should let her see more things and cultivate her to walk out of the small circle in her heart. Seeing that although Jiang Hai didn't understand, he was still willing to ask her how to do it, Mary Jane also sighed. She told Jiang Hai the method. As for how Jiang Hai would do it, she didn't know. Cultivate self-confidence. Okay, I know this. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai thought for a moment. Cultivate self-confidence. Well, he couldn't help but think of a group of people in his mind. If he wants to cultivate self-confidence, this method may be the best. After talking with Teacher Mary Jane for a while, Jiang Hai walked to his car, then picked up his phone and dialed a number. Not long after, a bright voice came from the other end of the phone. Hey, why did you think of calling me? It's really strange that you would take the initiative to contact me. Listening to the voice on the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai also smiled. The owner of this voice has a close relationship with him. Stop talking nonsense. I didn't call you the night before yesterday. Listening to the voice on the phone, Jiang Hai said very indifferently. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the person on the other side also chuckled. Well, you haven't called me for 37 hours. Well, tell me, what's the matter? I'm still practicing my dance. You won't call me at this time. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the person on the other side also laughed and said. Chapter 10:17. Jiang, where are we going? Sitting in the passenger seat of Jiang Hai's battle shield, Taraga asked with some confusion. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled. He looked at her sitting next to him and said, to New York. I'll take you out to play. What's so fun about New York? Haven't we been there many times? Although Jiang Hai was usually a homebody, he occasionally wanted to go out to play. He was tired of Boston, so he naturally went to New York many times. Even if it wasn't 30 times, it was at least 25 times. It's different this time. It's mainly to take you there. Okay, don't ask. You'll know when we get there. Jiang Hai said with a smile as he casually messed up Taraga's hair. Then, he sped up and rushed to New York. Ever since teacher Mary Jane and Jiang Hai said that Taraga was a little self-abased, a little unconfident, and a little insecure, Jiang Hai also thought about it. This was indeed a problem. Although such a child was very popular with parents in China, it was not a good thing to have no personality, low self-esteem, and strong aggressiveness in the United States. However, when it came to developing self-confidence, to be honest, Jiang Hai himself couldn't do it. It was said that aristocrats had to be rich for more than 3 generations to be called aristocrats, because the aura of aristocracy couldn't be imitated by ordinary people. Jiang Hai was not an aristocrat. Strictly speaking, he was a homebody nouveau riche. The things he considered were still the thoughts of a small farmer and his private thoughts. He didn't have much of a view of the overall situation. The only thing he thought about was how to live comfortably and how to be happy. He didn't think about things like the country, the regime, the nation, and the human race at all. Although he made $7 billion a year, his current thoughts were the same as those of a worker who made $70,000 a year. He didn't care about race, righteousness, or any other nonsense. He just wanted to buy whatever he wanted and eat whatever he wanted. Of course, this was also quite in line with the position of an otaku. He didn't care about race or righteousness at all. This was also the reason why he didn't go public, save his money in the bank, invest in a company, go to other places to buy land, play in real estate, and make friends with the rich and powerful. It was because he didn't want to go this way at all. Worrying about the country and the people had nothing to do with him. He didn't have such great sentiments, so naturally, he didn't have such great ideas. Jiang Hai himself was a loser. You couldn't expect him to teach Taraga to have a confident noble temperament. Therefore, he specially found a teacher for Taraga. The car drove very fast on the highway. After a few hours, they left Massachusetts. The outline of the world's largest city, New York, gradually appeared in the distance. Compared with the narrowness of Boston, New York, at least on the surface, looked a lot more magnificent. As the highway drove into the city of New York, the original speed gradually slowed down. New York, the world's largest city, naturally had its gorgeous side. The traffic flow was quite large, which was also one of the characteristics of this place. The car kept moving, but the speed just couldn't keep up. Even if it was 10 o'clock on Saturday, no one went to work, and there was no work. These were the people who came out to play. After entering the city, Jiang Hai drove for almost an hour before he arrived at the agreed place. The car just stopped and he saw a girl wearing a baseball cap trotting over in the distance. Looking at her, Jiang Hai also signaled Taraga to get out of the car with his eyes, and he opened the door and walked in. Jiang, you're finally here. The petite girl jumped into Jiang Hai's arms and gave him a French kiss without saying anything. Although this was the extremely open United States, this also attracted a lot of attention. Okay, come down. Patting the butt of the short girl in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the girl also jumped down. At most, she was a little more than 1.6 meters tall. Next to Jiang Hai, she was really petite. At the same time, she was also curiously looking at Taraga, who came with Jiang Hai. This must be Taraga. Hello, I'm Selena Gomez. Nice to meet you. After seeing Taraga, the girl greeted him with a smile and shook hands with Taraga. After Taraga saw this person clearly, he couldn't help but be a little surprised. Selena Gomez may not have any reputation in China. The people who know her only know about her and Justin Bieber. After all, Justin Bieber talked about these things every day. However, in the entertainment industry of the United States, she is definitely a small star, at the level of an A-list star. She had debuted in television dramas. Later, when she moved to the big screen, she had also been singing. Although she did not win any major awards like the Grammys or the Oscars, she had won countless small awards, especially the Teen Choice Awards. It was not an exaggeration to say that she had swept through them every year. Her main audience is junior high school students and college students. After entering society, they may not have any feelings for her. Taraga is a high school student. Even if she doesn't chase stars, she knows there is such a person. But she never knew that this guy had an affair with Jiang Hai. To be exact, it may be more than an affair. Hello, nice to meet you. Hearing Selena Gomez's words, Taraga also said with some embarrassment. Let's go and eat first. I know a very good Italian restaurant. Looking at her timid look, Selena Gomez couldn't help laughing, and then led Jiang Hai and the others to the distance. Let's go. Looking at the silly Tarrag, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. Then he led Tarrag to the front. Turning left and right, not long after, Jiang Hai and the others came to an Italian restaurant. This restaurant wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. The most important thing was that each seat had a small partition. This way, it wouldn't affect other people, and it could also protect privacy. Obviously, many people who didn't want others to know would come here to eat. Selena Gomez is obviously a regular here. After walking in, a waiter took her and Jiang Hai to a table by the window, but you can't see inside from outside the window. After sitting down, Jiang Hai also looked at the menu. When it comes to Italian cuisine, the first thing that comes to mind is pizza, then pasta. Indeed, speaking of Italian cuisine, it really doesn't give people much impression, but in fact, the mother of Western cuisine is Italian cuisine, not French cuisine. Many French dishes are transplanted from Italian cuisine. After all, don't forget that the predecessor of Italy was the Roman Empire. This guy ruled a lot of Europe. Therefore, Italian roast beef slices, seafood, meat plates, and so on, in the Western world, are not worse than French cuisine. Jiang Hai and the others came here to eat Italian cuisine. Naturally, it is impossible for them to eat pizza or cheese. For these female stars, cheese is a huge burden, so their staple food is pasta, spaghetti made with meat sauce, plus steak, barbecue plate, salad, and so on. It is also a rich meal, at least Jiang Hai likes to eat it. Americans don't like to talk about things while eating, so they just eat. After the meal, they eat dessert, which is the famous Italian tiramisu, and then they start to chat. Jiang also told me about your situation. Let's go for a walk in the afternoon. Looking at Taraga, Selena Gomez said to her with a smile. But after hearing her words, Taraga looked at Jiang Hai. She doesn't know whether this is reliable or not. Jiang Hai shrugged at her. When it comes to cultivating self-confidence, he still believes in Selena Gomez. Who is Selena Gomez? She is an artist. No matter what kind of actor or actress, it is very important to cultivate self-confidence. For example, when acting, if you are acting as a daughter of a rich family or a rich person, you have to act like that. It is not like in China, where you can attract a lot of fans even if you don't have any expression. This is not possible in the United States, at least there are very few people who can completely rely on their face to make a living. Can you tell me what you want to do? Under Taraga's gaze, Jiang Hai is ready to explore her bottom line. Do you know how to improve a man's self-confidence? Looking at Jiang Hai, Selena Gomez asked him with a smile. I don't know. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai himself is not a very confident person, so he shook his head. Power, status, fame, money, women, these things can improve a man's self-confidence and make him the focus of the attention. You are also a successful person, you don't know? Looking at Jiang Hai shaking his head, Selena Gomez can't help but smile. She likes Jiang Hai's silly feeling because she thinks he is really cute. Okay. After thinking about it carefully, Selena Gomez is actually right. How can a man be confident? It is to make others envious and jealous. High position, holding great power, money, and beautiful women. If all these are in the hands of a man, then this man will indeed be quite confident. Although Jiang Hai is not a person who is born to be confident, his words are indeed more firm now than a few years ago. A few years ago, not to mention a person representing a country, even a section chief can suppress him to smile. But now, a country's representative has to look at his face to buy meat and grass. Thinking about it this way, it is indeed a reflection of self-confidence. Seeing Jiang Hai nod in agreement, Selena Gomez looked at Taraga again. Chapter 10:18. Then how do you make a girl confident? Selena Gomez continued to ask while looking at Taraga. Money, power, status, fame, men? Taraga said with some confusion when she heard Selena Gomez's words. She really didn't know much about these things. Selena Gomez also laughed when she heard her words. You're so despicable. You're right, but you're also wrong. As the old saying goes, knowledge is fate, and knowledge is to serve money. Money is indeed the foundation. As for power, status, and fame, I can't teach you these. Maybe Prawalton can. As for men, at least it's not something you need to consider right now, Selena Gomez said with a smile as she looked at Taraga. Money, I have money. Taraga said hesitantly after thinking for a moment. Indeed, she was a little rich woman. The money that Jiang Hai usually gave her, including the money that Jiang Hai gave her after they found the gold. Taraga now had at least $2 million in her bank card. In fact, it wasn't just her. Every woman around Jiang Hai had at least money in their bank cards. Apart from Prawalton, Selena Gomez, and Chi Li, the ones with the most money were Chi Jia and Chi Ya. The two of them had shares of the Chi Group and shares of Jiang Hai's Tinglong Company. Their net worth was at least $1 billion. In terms of cash alone, there was almost $10 million in their bank cards. Feng Yunshen and Ai Xiaoxi definitely had a lot of money too. Feng Yunshen had more than $5 million, and Ai Xiaoxi had at least $4 million. Azalina and the others all had shares of the Tinglong Company and money from Jiang Hai. Their net worth was at least hundreds of millions. At the same time, they had no less than $6 or $7 million in cash, and at least $3 or $4 million. Among them, the ones with less cash were probably Valentina and the others who stayed in the company. After all, they came into contact with society and usually bought more things. People like Azalina and Galina were purely saving money. Jiang Hai naturally wouldn't treat Aphrodite and the others badly. Although they didn't have any shares, having 3 or 4 million yuan wasn't a problem. Moreover, they didn't have anywhere to spend it. At most, they could only buy some makeup products and new clothes. Delina and Marian were Jiang Hai's daughters in name, so naturally, they wouldn't be short of money. They had about $10 million in cash. Jiang Hai often gave them $200,000 or $300,000 to buy clothes and jewelry. But basically, they didn't buy jewelry, and the clothes were cheap, so they basically saved the money. The money. Taraga actually didn't have much money here. It was her fault for coming so late. It could be said that if the women in Jiang Hai's manor pooled their money together, it wouldn't be a problem for them to come up with $100 million in cash. This was just their pocket money, so they really didn't lack money. As for Pra Walton, Selena Gomez, and Chi Li, needless to say, Chi Li and Pra Walton were businessmen. Although they weren't as rich as Jiang Hai, they were definitely quite rich. Selena Gomez, being a star in the United States, was indeed more profitable, but it was also more tiring. Since she had a relationship with Jiang Hai, then Jiang Hai wouldn't let her be too tired. Although Jiang Hai wasn't a good person, he was still good to his women. Although he didn't directly give Selena Gomez money, he also had other ways. For example, Selena Gomez also released 2 CDs 2 years ago. He also bought 1 million CDs. Each CD was about $8, which was 16 million. Then he gave these CDs to the poor for free. After tax and the distribution company's share of the 16 million, Selena Gomez would have about 5 million left in her hands. So after knowing that Jiang Hai supported her, Selena Gomez was also very considerate to Jiang Hai. At the same time, she didn't lack money. This could be seen from the fact that she didn't release any CDs last year, and the frequency of her concerts was quite low. Hearing Taraga's words, Selena Gomez smiled and said seriously, "If the money is in the bank, then the money is not yours, but the bank's, so the first step for us to develop confidence is to spend money." Spend money? Hearing what she said, Taraga couldn't help but hesitate, because she was a little reluctant to spend money. "Okay, have you finished eating? Let's go." Seeing that Taraga was still a little confused, Selena Gomez also smiled, and then the three of them left the restaurant together. Of course, the money for the meal and the tip were indispensable. After getting in the car, Jiang Hai and the others went directly to Fifth Avenue. Under the command of Selena Gomez, they stopped in front of a Versace brand store. Then she turned her head and looked at Taraga behind her. "This is a Bluetooth headset. After you put it on, I will tell you what to do." Looking at Taraga with a smile, Selena Gomez said, and Taraga was stunned when he heard what she said. "You want me to go down by myself?" Looking at Selena Gomez in disbelief, Taraga looked at Jiang Hai for help until she nodded. However, Jiang Hai said that Selena Gomez was in charge of today's matters, so he could only express that he had no choice. Looking at the appearance of these two, Taraga sighed helplessly, then slowly opened the door and walked out. Seeing her action, Selena Gomez smiled and waved her hand, then rolled up the window again. "I miss it so much." Just as Taraga slowly moved toward the Versace store, Selena Gomez had already rushed to Jiang Hai's body. After whispering, she quickly untied Jiang Hai's pants. "Hey, we are on the street now." Looking at the anxious girl beside him, Jiang Hai was also a little flustered. "What are you afraid of?" "I am a public figure, I don't care. You just stay here." Rolling her eyes at Jiang Hai, Selena Gomez lowered her head. Jiang Hai also licked his lips, relaxed his body, and looked at the people passing by outside the window. "Miss, is there anything I can do for you?" At this time, Taraga, who was outside, finally walked to the door of the store. The waiter of the store, although looking at Taraga's civilian clothes, did not drive her away. Instead, he opened the door and asked her. In fact, in the eyes of these people, Taraga was not a potential customer. That I. Listening to this person's words, Taraga said with some hesitation. She really didn't know what to say. She just glanced at the things in this store, and they were really expensive. "Tell her to take out your new spring collection." Although she was busy, Selena Gomez did not forget her duty and spoke to Taraga through the Bluetooth headset. I am here to buy things. Take out your new spring collection this year." Hearing Selena Gomez's words, Taraga also had some confidence. Although she still stuttered, she still spoke to the person in front of her. Oh. Okay, this way please." Hearing what Taraga said, the waiter here couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, but her good professionalism still made her lead Taraga into the store in doubt. Then she signaled a few waiters to come over and take out this year's new women's clothing. Looking at these things in front of her, Taraga was a little confused. Try them one by one. Unless you hate a certain style very much, try them all. Listening to the voice in the headset, Selena Gomez also said a sentence. After hearing her words, Taraga was also desperate. She braced herself, gritted her teeth, and walked into the fitting room. At this time, Selena Gomez outside was no longer satisfied with just swallowing and vomiting. She pulled the tab under Jiang Hai's chair and moved Jiang Hai's chair to the largest position. At the same time, she laid down. Then she directly crossed the middle partition and came to Jiang Hai's side. I can't stand it, hurry up. When Jiang Hai finally couldn't stand it and ended, Taraga on the other side had also finished trying all the clothes she saw. Half an hour had passed unknowingly, and Taraga didn't know what to do next. Say, wrap up all the clothes I have tried, and then take out the bank card. Listening to Taraga's request for help, although Selena Gomez was tired and panting, she still told her what to say very calmly. Taraga also did as she said. When Taraga's voice fell, the good attitude of the originally good waitresses increased by another octave. She didn't buy shoes because she was used to wearing sneakers, but she bought a few bags because she had seen them in school before. Those girls would have some handbags or handbags. Anyway, she spent money, so she didn't care how much she spent. Moreover, Jiang Hai said that the things she bought today were all his, and he would reimburse her. She didn't buy shoes because she was used to wearing sneakers, but she bought a few bags because she had seen them in school before. Those girls would have some handbags or handbags. Anyway, she spent money, so she didn't care how much she spent. Besides, Jiang Hai said that the things she bought today were all his, and he would reimburse her. After walking around, the waitresses behind Taraga walked out of Versace with more than 20 bags. Chapter 10:19. How was it? Did it feel good? Seeing her come back, Selena Gomez smiled and opened the car door. She helped her throw the clothes and bags into the car and then asked her. It's okay, but these things cost more than 300,000. After hearing Selena Gomez's words, Tarag hesitated for a moment and said with some hesitation. She was now thinking about how much beef and ordinary clothes they would need to buy for $300,000. How long would it be enough for their tribe to survive? TSK, these rich people were really wasting resources. Hey, this is nothing. Let's continue. Let's go to Estee Lauder over there. Hearing her words, Selena Gomez couldn't help but laugh. Then she proudly pulled her and walked away. She wouldn't let Taraga get in the car because the smell in the car hadn't dissipated yet. She was a very careful girl. The appearance of a successful woman was composed of several parts. Beautiful clothes, perfect jewelry, exquisite makeup, and a beautiful hairstyle. These were the standard equipment of a confident woman. Now that there were clothes, Selena Gomez was ready to prepare other things for Taraga. Makeup was a very important point. If it was makeup products, many people who had some understanding of luxury makeup products would say that since Jiang Hai didn't lack money, why didn't he buy the legendary Chanel No. 5? Chanel No. 5 had a great reputation in the world. As for what kind of reputation it had, Jiang Hai didn't explain it here. There was nothing much to say. Just find an encyclopedia and there would be a detailed explanation. But those who had really been to the United States would know that although Chanel's makeup products and perfume had a certain sales volume in the United States, the real #1 luxury brand in the United States was Estee Lauder. This brand was originally an American brand. Although the United States wouldn't be like Japan and South Korea, where the quality of their products was the same, they would naturally support their own brands. The products sold by Estee Lauder in the United States weren't worse than Chanel. Moreover, they had more benefits and discounts. Therefore, in the upper class of the United States, many people liked to buy Estee Lauder's makeup products. Now, Selena Gomez took Taraga to a nearby Estee Lauder. After about 2 hours, they came out. According to Selena Gomez, they tried a total of 3 types of makeup. Taraga was obviously more suitable for fruit makeup. After putting on foundation, drawing eyebrow lines, and brushing eyelashes, Turaga looked more beautiful than before. However, Jiang Hai didn't care too much about it. After choosing the makeup products, it was time to buy jewelry. For example, these people weren't too picky about the materials. Because at that price, the materials must be the best. They were more interested in the brands, such as Cartier, Tiffany, and Bulgari. These were the top 3 brands. The same things were sold here were much more expensive. For example, a diamond bracelet might be sold for $100,000 in some stores, but it would be sold for $10 million here. They were selling the brand and design. Jiang Hai didn't care about these things the most. However, the girls were very interested in these things. But Selena Gomez didn't take Turaga to these places. Instead, they went to Swarovski. At this time, some people would say that they had heard of this brand, but not many people knew about this brand. According to Selena Gomez, this brand's products were all fake. Yes, even if it was real Swarovski products, they were all fake. For example, the diamonds were all fake because they were selling fake products. Their original intention was to imitate crystal products. The most famous thing here was the rhinestones, which were artificial diamonds. They were quite cheap. At the same time, this wasn't a luxury brand, just an ordinary business. They sold designs, nothing more. Therefore, if a woman saw her boyfriend buying a Swarovski product for her, she would directly throw it at his face because it was similar to scolding him. Of course, it wasn't a problem to buy some small accessories, such as some watches, pendants, and so on. Selena Gomez was only 25 years old this year. She was a girl in 1992. Although she was a little older than Turaga, she also knew what accessories girls at Turaga's age wanted. There was no need for things like diamond necklaces, rings, and so on. Instead, some small accessories on the belt, bracelets, and so on were enough to shine. Therefore, buying these things cost a total of $10,000. Then there was the most time-consuming thing, hair. Women were very particular about starting from scratch. When they moved to a new house, they had to change their hairstyle. When they changed their job, they had to change their hairstyle. When a relationship ended, they had to change their hairstyle. When something happened at home, they had to change their hairstyle. When they gave birth to a child, they had to change their hairstyle. They always had a reason to go to the hairdresser, so women really liked to do their hair. In Jiang Hai's opinion, there were a total of 4 hairstyles: short hair, braids, single ponytail, double ponytail, long hair, and curly hair. Yes, there were only these few hairstyles, but in the eyes of women, there might be thousands of hairstyles. It was difficult to understand. After buying these things, Selena Gomez directly took Jiang Hai and Turaga to a hairdresser where she specialized in styling. Well, it seemed to be called a styling studio now. Originally, Jiang Hai didn't want to go in, but Selena Gomez forced him to go in. After watching Selena Gomez talk with a sissy for a while, the sissy took Jiang Hai to wash his hair. After wiping it clean, he went behind Jiang Hai and unconsciously touched Jiang Hai's hair with his hands. "Oh, dear, your hair is really good. I want to have hair like this, but unfortunately, when I was young, I permed my hair and damaged it. It's really annoying." As soon as this guy opened his mouth, Jiang Hai felt a chill from the bottom of his feet to his heart in an instant. "Just cut it shorter for me." "Okay, it's neat. Also, don't talk anymore." Jiang Hai had this hairstyle since he was 5 years old. He had never cut or blow-dried his hair. He also never did anything unusual. He had always had the same hairstyle. Tisk, it's really boring. Then let's watch the music video. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, this sissy twitched his mouth and picked up his scissors. At the same time, he turned on a small TV beside him. Jiang Hai was also a cheap person. Cutting hair was very boring. So, he wanted to watch what was on the TV. When the music started, he could only say that it was okay. It was a Soviet-Russian song. Jiang Hai's family lived in Bing City, and since he was young, he had listened to Moscow's outskirts at night. He was not against Soviet Russian songs. At the same time, the TV was showing a small wooden house in a snowy area. There was an introduction of the song. The song was called Zonhop. Well, Jiang Hai's English was really not good. Pfft, what the hell is this? After watching for less than 20 seconds, Jiang Hai could not take it anymore. He felt like he was going to puke out his lungs. How can you say it's a ghost? It's really annoying. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the guy who cut his hair could not help but punch him. Then, he winked at him. Jiang Hai really wanted to vomit now. Turn it off for me, and then change the haircut. Rubbing his forehead, Jiang Hai swore that he would never let this guy touch his head again. It was too disgusting. There was no other way. A straight guy like him really could not bear this kind of thing. TCH. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the sissy raised his head and left without saying anything. After a while, Selena Gomez came in with a punk. Fortunately, although this punk was quite cruel to himself, he still perfectly fulfilled Jiang Hai's requirements. Only Selena Gomez was there holding back her laughter. Okay, what are you laughing at? What kind of place are you looking for? Rolling his eyes at her, Jiang Hai said with a look of displeasure. Okay, Kevin is the best image designer here. You can't enjoy this blessing. By the way, don't leave tonight. I just received a call. Demi is having a party tonight. Let's go and join in the fun. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Selena Gomez said to Jiang Hai. I don't like to go to parties. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai's brows wrinkled. What he said was the truth. He really didn't like to go there. He didn't like to go to places that were too loud. It would make his mind tense up and uncomfortable. It's a theme party. It won't be too noisy. Please, don't tell me you don't even want to stay for one night. Looking at Jiang Hai, Selena Gomez put her hands together and looked at Jiang Hai with a pitiful face. Thinking about how he usually spent too little time with Selena Gomez, Jiang Hai could not refuse her. He could only nod helplessly, hoping that it would not be too noisy. Chapter 10:20. Yeah. Seeing that Jiang Hai agreed, Selena Gomez couldn't help but smile and wave her little fist. Let's do the hair here first, then go to eat, and then go to my house. After sending Taraga back, I will change my clothes and we will go. Selena Gomez might really like parties. Seeing that Jiang Hai had agreed, she smiled and said, let's go. Looking at her, Jiang Hai always felt that he had fallen into a trap. After a while, Taraga appeared in front of Jiang Hai with her new hairstyle. Taraga's previous hairstyle was basically long black hair or a ponytail. In Jiang Hai's opinion, this was enough. But now, although it was still long black hair, it was not too straight. At the end of the hair, they made it look like an inside button. It really looked better, but Jiang Hai didn't know why. After designing Taraga's hairstyle, Jiang Hai, Selena Gomez, and Taraga went to have dinner together. Dinner was French food. Because Selena Gomez had been thinking about the party, she ate quickly. Then, because Taraga was still underage, Jiang Hai and Selena Gomez went back to Selena Gomez's villa in New York with her. After arranging a room for Taraga, they told her where the bathroom was, where the kitchen was, and there were many ready-to-eat things in the kitchen. If she was hungry, she could eat them directly. What was the Wi-Fi in the house, how to watch the TV. After everything was done, Selena Gomez pulled Jiang Hai into her room. Hurry up, take off your clothes. As soon as they entered the room, Selena Gomez took off her clothes directly. Didn't you say you were going to a party? What are you doing? Seeing that Selena Gomez quickly took off the clothes on her upper body, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at her with some doubts. Do I have to do it again before leaving? Today is a themed party. Do you know that it's a costume party? Everyone has to dress up as the characters in the anime. While talking to Jiang Hai, Selena Gomez had already taken off all her clothes. She stood in front of her wardrobe naked. After opening the wardrobe, she saw that there was a special door inside that was filled with anime cosplay costumes. Ugh! Looking at the wardrobe full of costumes, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. This is a bit too much. But I don't have those clothes. Let's forget about it. Seeing that she took out more than a dozen clothes at once and threw them on the bed, then began to pick them up, Jiang Hai used to be a pure otaku, so he naturally watched a lot of anime and movies. Now, many of the clothes on Selena Gomez's bed were from anime and movies, such as Sailor Moon, Catgirl, Clown Girl, Wisteria Girl, and so on. Wonder Woman's costume looked too low now. In addition, there were some costumes from games, such as Resident Evil, Chun-Li, and Ollie from LOL, which had been popular in recent years, and so on. There was a mess of everything. After she took them out, she kept gesturing there. And, this is okay. There are clothes for people who don't have clothes to change into. You can choose after you go there. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Selena Gomez said with a smile while trying. Finally, she picked a bounty hunter Miss Misfortune's costume in LOL and put it on directly. To be honest, Selena Gomez was very seductive. Now that she was cosplaying, Jiang Hai couldn't help but get hard again to show his respect. How is it? Does it look good? While talking, Selena Gomez moved her exposed waist. It looks good, but it's too revealing. What if your belt falls off? Hearing Selena Gomez's words, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. If it was just when they were together, Jiang Hai would be very happy with her dressed like this, but he can't be the only man to go to a party, right? Letting others take advantage of her, even if it was just a look, Jiang Hai would be unhappy. TSK, you can even be jealous. What about this one? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although Selena Gomez despised Jiang Hai, the smile on her face couldn't be hidden. When a man was jealous of a woman, it meant that the man cared about the woman. Therefore, Selena Gomez's heart was also sweet. So she took the initiative to change her clothes, and then picked up another set of clothes. It was still the set of clothes of the bounty hunter Miss Misfortune in LOL, but it was the set of clothes of the Empress. Although there was still a lot of skin above the cleavage, the other parts were more or less covered. It was more like a set of pirate clothes. Jiang Hai glanced at the other clothes. This set was relatively less revealing, so he nodded. Then Selena Gomez smiled and left with Jiang Hai. The two of them drove in New York City, turning left and right. Not long after, they arrived at a small street in Manhattan. Although the street was not wide, there were many luxury cars parked here at this time. This was the place where the female stars and socialites gathered. Originally, Jiang Hai also wanted to park here, but Selena Gomez didn't let him park here. This was because in some bars, naturally, there were security guards to prevent reporters from entering, but outside, there were no restrictions. So she still led Jiang Hai to the back door. After getting out of the car with Jiang Hai, they walked there. There were 8 big men standing at the back door. Naturally, they knew Selena Gomez. When they saw her coming, they nodded. Although they looked at Jiang Hai with some doubts, they didn't stop Selena Gomez from bringing him here. They followed behind Selena Gomez, and Jiang Hai also walked in with her. Walking into the nightclub, Jiang Hai heard some music and some screams, but as Selena Gomez said, the music wasn't too loud. At least in this place, Jiang Hai could still reluctantly accept it. I'll take you to change your clothes. Hearing the music, Selena Gomez also swayed to the rhythm, but she didn't go directly. After saying something to Jiang Hai, she took Jiang Hai to a nearby room where they could change their clothes. When Jiang Hai walked in, he saw many sets of clothes hanging on the wall. There was also a wardrobe, and some changing rooms next to it. Everyone had their own space, and there was no need to distinguish between men and women. When Jiang Hai and Selena Gomez walked in, there were many people changing their clothes in the room. There were men and women, and they were all dressed differently. When they felt someone push the door open, the people in the room also looked over. "Hi, Selena." Seeing the two people coming in, the people in the room smiled and said. One of the women trotted over and excitedly held Selena Gomez's hand. The two of us really thought of the same thing. Look, I'm also a bounty hunter. The woman said to Selena Gomez while showing off her figure. But compared to Selena Gomez, who dressed more conservatively because of Jiang Hai's influence, she dressed much more wildly. Indeed, this skin was originally called Western Cowboy in the game. Wow, you dare to show off your small waist? Don't you have thighs and heels? Aren't you afraid of being posted online? Looking at this person, Selena Gomez also smiled and said to the woman. Hearing her words, the woman couldn't help but pout. Who cares about that? By the way, who's this? I've never seen you before. At this time, she also saw Jiang Hai, who came in with Selena Gomez, and couldn't help but ask with some doubts. This is my boyfriend, Jiang Hai. This is my friend, Ashley Glynn. She played Twilight. Hearing her words, Selena Gomez couldn't help but smile and said. Hi. Hello, my name is Ashley Glynn, you can call me Ashley. Hearing Selena Gomez's words, Ashley Glynn was a little surprised, then took the initiative to stretch out her hand and shook Jiang Hai's hand, but just as Jiang Hai was about to let go, she scratched Jiang Hai's palm, which was a little awkward. Hey, what are you doing? Seeing Ashley Glynn's action, Selena Gomez couldn't help but frown and say. Sorry, I'm used to it. You guys pick first, I'm going out. Hearing Selena Gomez's words, Ashley Glynn also laughed and then walked out of the room first, leaving Jiang Hai and Selena Gomez behind. It was really a little awkward. I should have squeezed you dry before coming. I was so busy playing that I forgot there were so many little sluts here. Seeing that Ashley Glynn had left, Selena Gomez could not help but curl her lips as she whispered to Ashley Glynn. Oh, hee hee. Don't worry, I'm not such a casual person. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but touch his nose awkwardly. What else can he say now? In fact, if she is willing to leave, Jiang Hai would like to go back and try to see what she likes to do when she wears those clothes, but obviously she won't leave so easily. Forget it, I'll keep an eye on you in a while. Come on, pick something you like, let's go out and have fun. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Selena Gomez shook her head, then pulled Jiang Hai to the hanger next to her and picked up carefully. Jiang Hai also looked at these clothes and couldn't help but touch his chin. Won't it be shameful to wear these clothes? Looking at Jiang Hai, who had been following behind her, Selena Gomez also smiled and took the initiative to pull him out. As soon as Jiang Hai came out, he really attracted a lot of people, especially the attention of women. Jiang Hai's clothes were locked in the cabinet provided by the people here. At this time, Selena Gomez was still in the set of clothes she wore when she came, and Jiang Hai also changed into white trousers with a black belt. He wore a coat that exposed his chest like a cloak with red sleeves, a black cape, and a hat with bird feathers on his head. If someone familiar with One Piece was here, they would recognize this outfit. It was the outfit of the world's #1 swordsman in One Piece, Hawkeye Joraker Mihawk. Compared with those tights, Jiang Hai didn't care about exposing his chest. Jiang Hai was 196 meters and 115 kilograms, but he didn't look fat. Why? It was because his muscles were extremely dense. Looking at Jiang Hai's exposed 10-pack abs, as well as his full chest, mermaid belt, male dog waist, and the Kirin arm supporting his clothes, Jiang Hai attracted a lot of attention as soon as he came out. Who is the person besides Selena? Looking at Jiang Hai's figure, many women's eyes lit up. Some people had even asked about Jiang Hai's situation, and some people even took the initiative to come over. That's Jiang Hai, Selena's boyfriend. His body is really good, but unfortunately, he is Asian. His size isn't very good. After hearing these people's words, Ashley Glynn, who Jiang Hai had just met, whispered in her small circle. Hearing her words, many women around her burst into laughter. I like Asians. They are more interesting and gentle than those guys. Don't you think it's fun to stuff that size into your mouth? At this time, another woman also whispered with a smile, causing these people to laugh again. Let's go. But at this time, Selena Gomez and Jiang Hai couldn't hear this. They came in, but the music didn't stop. She took Jiang Hai to a booth next to her and asked the waiter to bring some drinks. She sat there and talked with Jiang Hai. Of course, she also introduced the people outside. And Jiang Hai also found that his eyes were not enough. The people who would attend this event could be said to be rich and noble. Basically, they were all in the entertainment industry. No matter which country's entertainment industry it was, there were some requirements for appearance. So it can be said that the people who came here today were all handsome men and beautiful women, especially some female stars, who were wearing quite skimpy clothes. Originally, Jiang Hai thought that dressing like Ashley Glynn just now was the limit, but then he found that he was thinking too much. The people here were really wearing all kinds of clothes. Some female stars even only wore underwear, fluffy, with a small tail behind, containing rabbits, cats, and little devils. Looking at this exciting scene, some parts of Jiang Hai's body couldn't help but harden shamefully, so he unnaturally put his legs together to block. However, his model was indeed a bit scary. It didn't block that well, and his pants were a bit tight. Hey, Selena, you're late. Just as Jiang Hai wanted to relax and take a deep breath, a fragrant wind suddenly came, and then a woman in a tight leather jacket came in from outside. Although this woman was wearing a tight leather jacket, the zipper on the front was pulled low enough. Almost all the balls were exposed except for 2 points. Are you faking it, Black Widow? Seeing this person come in, Selena Gomez didn't stand up but looked at her curiously. Seeing that Selena Gomez guessed right, this person also made a shooting gesture. Hey, Jiang, this is Demi Lovato, my good friend. Today's lying down was also done by her. Demi, this is Jiang, my boyfriend. After a simple exchange, Selena Gomez introduced Jiang Hai. Oh, hello, my name is Jiang Hai. It's nice to meet you. Hearing Selena Gomez's words, Jiang Hai also stood up and took the initiative to shake her hand. Hello, Mr. Jiang, nice to meet you too. I wonder if I can borrow Selena. There are many sisters waiting for her over there. After shaking hands with Jiang Hai, Demi Lovato said with a smile. Of course. With a nod, Jiang Hai made a gesture of invitation. Demi Lovato and Selena Gomez ran to a bar in the distance. At this time, there were many girls gathered there. Seeing Selena Gomez coming over, they all laughed and chatted together. Jiang Hai also sat in place, drinking a drink while looking at the people outside. Just as he was looking here, Ashley Glynn, whom he met once, walked over with a smile. Hey, handsome, aren't you going to dance? Leaning against the door frame of the booth, the woman said with a smile. I don't like noisy environments. Hearing the woman's words, Jiang Hai shook his head. He was telling the truth. Wow, there aren't many young people who don't like parties nowadays. Do you mind if I sit here for a while? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ashley Glynn said with a smile. Go ahead. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also motioned her to do as she pleases. Although he didn't know the purpose of this woman coming here, Jiang Hai didn't say that it was inconvenient. After all, she is also a person in the entertainment industry and knows Selena Gomez. Mr. Jiang is from Huaxia, right? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, this person didn't hesitate and sat directly on the sofa here, and then asked Jiang Hai. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai also nodded. This is easy to guess. Since there are only 2 names, he can't be an islander. From the time they met, Jiang Hai has never bowed, which can be ruled out as a South Korean, so he can only be from Huaxia. Ashley Glynn's brain is still very fast. I don't know where Mr. Jiang made his fortune. After confirming Jiang Hai's nationality, she continued to ask with a smile. Oh, I'm a cattle farmer. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also said indifferently. He was not wrong. He was a cattle farmer. In addition to cattle, he also raised fish. He said this everywhere, although it was a bit of pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Wow, this is a very stable career, isn't it? Is your farm in Montana or in California or Texas? Hearing that Jiang Hai was a cattle farmer, Ashley Glynn was stunned for a moment, and then asked with some doubts. Chapter 10:22. Oh, they're not here, they're in the suburbs of Boston. Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai also said indifferently. As soon as she heard Jiang Hai's words, Ashley Glynn's interest in Jiang Hai instantly changed from the original 60% to 5%, because in her opinion, a cattle ranch is naturally large. But if you want to occupy a large enough place, you need some empty mines and a large state. Montana, Texas, and Mexico are among the best places to raise cattle. One is vast and sparsely populated, the second is a large open grassland, and the third is basically the industry of all the major animal husbandry tycoons in the United States is here. The values of the Americans are not to laugh at the poor, nor are they the kind of people who have no bottom line to suck up to the rich. But in their hearts, the most important thing to measure a person is whether he has money. As long as the money comes from a legitimate source and is a stable income, they will welcome your existence. Of course, how much you earn also depends on your level, just like Ashley Glynn now doesn't think that Jiang Hai is at the same level as her. These stars are very knowledgeable. People like Ashley Glynn naturally know that if a manor wants to make money, it doesn't need to be big, and if it wants to be big, it has to be in the 3 states mentioned above. Boston is one of the first states in the United States. Naturally, she knew how small that place was. She didn't think that there would be a big manor there. If there wasn't a big manor, it meant that Jiang Hai didn't have much money. If he didn't have much money, it meant that Selena Gomez had found a poor man. Whether Selena Gomez really has feelings for him and found a poor man, she doesn't care, but at least she won't make friends with such a person, so after a few words, she got up and left. Jiang Hai doesn't care about this. She doesn't want to leave. In fact, it doesn't have much to do with him. After she left, Selena Gomez came over with a smile. At least you are honest. Sitting next to Jiang Hai, Selena Gomez said happily. It seems that she also saw Ashley Glynn coming over just now. Otherwise, she would not be so happy. She knows how chaotic the American entertainment industry is. Now that she is gone, it means that she did not get anything out of Jiang Hai. It seems that Jiang Hai is quite honest. Of course. Are there any rewards? Upon hearing Selena Gomez's words, Jiang Hai looked at her with a smile and asked. After hearing what Jiang Hai said, she pretended to think for a moment. Tell me, what kind of reward do you want? A pair of big eyes stared unblinkingly at Jiang Hai as she asked him. When we do that at night, can you change into a few more sets of clothes? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled and leaned over. He saw a lot of good clothes just now. Well, for the sake of you being so obedient today. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Selena Gomez also said with a smile. After the two played here for almost an hour, the two left. When they returned home, Taraga was already resting in his room. As for Jiang Hai and Selena Gomez, they naturally went back shamelessly. This night, the two basically didn't sleep. In this night, the two changed almost 7 or 8 sets of clothes and played until dawn. The next morning, Selena Gomez couldn't stand it anymore and fell into a deep sleep. Jiang Hai was also afraid that she would hurt her body, but he really couldn't control himself last night, so before leaving, he deliberately injected aura into her body to strengthen her physical fitness. After that, he took Taraga to have breakfast and bought a set of food for Selena Gomez. After that, he went back to the manor with Taraga. After returning to the manor, looking at the new Taraga, the girls in Jiang Hai's manor were all asking. There was no woman who didn't like to be beautiful. Usually, everyone was the same, so it didn't matter. Now that Taraga had changed, they were also a little moved, especially Delina and Marion. One must know that the 3 of them often played together before. On the other hand, Tarag was quite generous. She bought clothes, makeup products, and the hairstyle that was specially designed for her in the dressing room. She also exchanged ideas with the two girls. However, what was suitable for her might not be suitable for Delina and the others. But for a while, the girls in Jiang Hai's manor also found something to play with. As for the older girls, they were also paying attention to these things. Since they were interested in these things, the next day, Qi Jia waved her hand and signaled everyone to go to Boston in batches starting from tomorrow. Buying things and changing themselves couldn't just be Taraga, right? They also didn't lack money. When Taraga went to school on Monday, it can be said that it caused a sensation in her school. Many people in this high school knew that Taraga was rich, and that she was living in Jiang Hai's manor. Therefore, no one dared to provoke her openly or secretly. However, not provoking her didn't mean that they would play with her, right? Especially looking at her rustic appearance, only the carefree Bessie Oliver and the tomboyish Pearl Circe would play with her. But today, when she went to school, those people discovered that they were really blind. The girls were cursing the vixen and little slut in their hearts, while the boys were shouting beautiful women and goddesses in their hearts. Taraga originally wasn't ugly, and her facial features were very delicate. However, because she was in the mountains all year round, she was a little tanned and her skin wasn't very good. These days, although she ate a lot of good things, her skin returned to normal, but it was still very dark. In addition, she didn't wear makeup, didn't do her hair, didn't wear jewelry, and didn't wear any beautiful clothes, so she usually looked very rustic. But today, she was completely different. She had put on some light makeup on her skin. At least, she didn't look completely bronze anymore. Her facial features were more three-dimensional, her eyes were brighter, and her skin was more tender. Her button-down hair bounced up and down as she walked. She looked both intellectual and emotional. She was wearing the Versace clothes that she bought yesterday, with small Swarovski accessories on her hands and feet, plus a pair of casual shoes. She looked very lively and fashionable. As soon as she walked to school, she attracted a lot of attention. And under these people's admiring gazes, Taraga's confidence was rising rapidly. As the saying goes, 3 people make a tiger. When only one person said that you were beautiful, you might laugh at yourself. However, when 10,000 people said that you were beautiful, that person's self-confidence would expand infinitely. Tarag was the same. Seeing her like this, her teacher Mary Jane specially called Jiang Hai and said that he did a good job. In this regard, Jiang Hai could only laugh. Of course, he knew that he did a good job. In the next few days, the trend that Taraga brought about made Jiang Hai happy for a long time. Why? It was mainly because of an old saying. To be honest, Jiang Hai usually didn't pay much attention to makeup. At least, he rarely touched women with heavy makeup because you didn't know how scary she was after removing her makeup. It was precisely because of this that the women in Jiang Hai's manor basically didn't put on makeup. At most, they would apply some sunscreen or hydration products. Therefore, there were very few makeup products. Recently, the trend brought by Tarag had made these girls put on a little makeup. If they looked good, naturally, Jiang Hai would be the one to take advantage of it. In recent days, Jiang Hai felt that his waist might not be able to bear it, but he still enjoyed it and didn't get tired of it. When a person's life reached this level, there was no need to ask for more. Just like what Selena Gomez said, the things that men pursued were nothing more than those few points. Money, power, fame, women. Now that Jiang Hai had all these, it didn't matter if he became a salted fish or something. Speaking of money first, it was impossible for Jiang Hai to be as rich as a country, but it was no problem for him to be as rich as a province. Speaking of power, he was like a local tyrant in Winthrop and even in Boston. In China, he might have money but no power. He was probably meat on some people's plates and could be eaten whenever they wanted. But in the United States, he was the local tyrant. Speaking of fame, Jiang Hai's beef, fish, and forage were sold all over the world. He was quite famous. Finally, there were women. Jiang Hai was surrounded by beautiful women. If he wanted to sleep with them, he could sleep with them at any time. Moreover, he had a lot of choices. He could even do it together. Under such circumstances, what was there to strive for? He didn't have any thoughts of rushing out of the universe and going to the world. He could buy whatever he wanted, do whatever he wanted, eat whatever he wanted, and it was all the best. His life was like this, and he didn't have any other requirements. He wasn't one of those empty, lonely rich kids who had nothing to do but look for excitement. He was just an ordinary upstart. He didn't have any thoughts of changing the world. He just wanted to change his own life. Just as Jiang Hai was happily passing every day step by step, one day in late April, Dulles Gerard, who had gone to Europe to participate in this year's Magoun wine competition, called Jiang Hai and temporarily put an end to his happy daily life. Jiang Hai was a little unhappy about this, but even if he was unhappy, he still had to go to Europe. This time, Dulles Gerard really had something to discuss with Jiang Hai. A certain red wine distributor in Europe had taken a fancy to Jiang Hai's products. In order to expand the red wine market, Jiang Hai had to go. But the good news was that he could take his own plane. Chapter 10:23. Yes, Jiang Hai's plane had arrived. To be exact, it had arrived a few days ago. He took Azalina and the others to see the plane. After making sure that everything on the plane was in accordance with his requirements, he took the plane for a spin and then temporarily put it in the Tinglong company. There was no other way. Jiang Hai was a person who was really idle. He didn't have anything to do by plane. In the beginning, he was hot-headed and bought a plane. It was indeed convenient to travel, but he really didn't use it often. However, he couldn't support the crew for no reason, so he temporarily gave it to the Soaring Dragon Company. The Soaring Dragon Company had a lot of planes, but they were basically second-hand cargo planes. When the company was first established, Jiang Hai bought it for nearly $200 million. Because it was a cargo plane, it wasn't expensive. He bought 3 large planes, 6 medium planes, and 11 small planes. The small planes were for domestic use in the United States, the medium planes were for the Middle East, Australia, and Europe, and the 3 large planes were mainly for Asia. Cargo planes weren't as expensive as passenger planes. After all, they didn't need to be renovated and were mainly used to store goods. So basically, they could only fly steadily without any problems. A large passenger plane, like Jiang Hai's, cost tens of millions of dollars, but a second-hand cargo plane only cost $6 million. A medium-sized plane only cost $2 million, while a small plane could fly across the entire United States. For example, the one that flew from Boston to Miami only cost $600,000 to $700,000. It wasn't much different from the new twin-engine plane in Jiang Hai's house. However, it didn't cost too much to buy these planes, but Jiang Hai rented a warehouse building and 2 runways at Boston's Edward Lawrence Logan International Airport, which cost him a lot of money. Now that the new plane was in place, the new plane was parked at the airport here. Normally, the plane would be given to the people of the Tinglong Company, who could use it when they went on a business trip or something. However, when Jiang Hai wanted to use it, Jiang Hai had to use it first unconditionally. After all, it was his. Since the plane was available, they just had to pick a day to go, because they could leave at any time. This time, only Jiang Hai, Azalina, Wallace Shelley, and Knerson Peters were going. Recently, the 3 of them had accompanied Jiang Hai the most. Knerson Peters was very good, and seemed to be close to strangers. Wallace Shelley was responsible for the network and understanding the situation, and Azalina was responsible for protecting Jiang Hai. The division of labor was clear. Originally, Jiang Hai also wanted to ask Qi Jia if they wanted to go. After all, they were going to Paris, France this time. But they had already been there once last year. This time, they didn't intend to go. First, it was because they had already been there. There was really nothing fun there. The things that could be bought in Paris could still be bought on Fifth Avenue in New York, and the price might be cheaper. New York could be reached in 3 hours by car. But to fly to France, they needed to drive to the airport first, then fly for a few hours. After getting off the plane, they had to take a few hours by car. So, those luxuries and the like were no longer tempting to them. Secondly, Jiang Hai's time this time was very short. He would only be going for 2 or 3 days. There was no need for him to stay for a few days. So, after they took turns with Jiang Hai a few times, they directly let go of Jiang Hai, who was already a little weak, and left. Sitting in the plane, Jiang Hai didn't take long to arrive at Charles de Gaulle Airport in France. After getting off the plane, Dulce Gerard had been waiting there for a long time. Seeing Jiang Hai and the others coming out, he immediately smiled and greeted them. "Jiang, this is a big deal." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Dulce Gerard also smiled and said to him, "What kind of big deal is it?" Looking at Dulce Gerard's smiling face, Jiang Hai also smiled. If it can make Dulce Gerard, an old man who is used to seeing the world, so happy, it means that the other party's price is really high this time. The initial intention is to increase our market price by 20% from last year's market price. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Dulce Gerard also whispered. After hearing Dulce Gerard's words, Jiang Hai's eyebrows couldn't help but raise. This number is really a bit fierce. You know, although Jiang Hai's goal is to sell a bottle of $2,000, but that is to hide the wine for 5 years. Now, his wine has only been hidden for 2 years. There are still 3 years to go. And the wine that was hidden for a year last year, Jiang Hai's selling price is $800 a bottle. 50,000 bottles a year would be $40 million. With an increase of 20%, that would be $8 million in profit, which would be $960 a bottle. He was one step closer to his goal. Besides, he really wasn't just selling 50,000 bottles a year. Since they know that this business is good, they can also make more. Anyway, they have enough manpower. After all, there are so many girls in Jiang Hai's house who are idle. Making wine often is good for their skin and can also give them something to do. This year, according to Dulce Gerard, Jiang Hai's grape output is more than the previous 2 years. Originally, grapes are not annual plants. The more years they are raised, the more they will grow. According to Dulce Gerard and O'Connor Murphy's statistics, Jiang Hai can make about 150,000 bottles this year. Next year, these 150,000 bottles will be sold, according to $960 a bottle, that's $144 million. Although it can't be compared with fishing and animal husbandry, this is really a business without any capital, and the investment is not big. Now, not to mention hundreds of millions of dollars in profit, at least tens of millions of dollars in profit, Jiang Hai is still very interested. "Tell me in detail." Hearing Dulce Gerard's words, Jiang Hai asked as he walked out. Dulce Gerard also told Jiang Hai in detail. Last year, some of Jiang Hai's red wine was sold to Prawalton, and some to some European distributors. In fact, there was no advertising or anything like that, and the brand of his Soaring Dragon Manor was used. The sales volume was okay. Basically, when put on the shelves, it can be sold out within 3 months. Basically, there is no backlog, and there is no shortage of supply. The Soaring Dragon Manor's brand is indeed strong, but that is in the beef and seafood market. Although red wine is also a food, more people recognize the old brands of France. It is not easy for some new brands to enter the market. It is like the same kind of electrical appliances. If a domestic American suddenly comes out with a mobile phone, how much trust do you have in it? No matter what it is, there is a specialization in the industry, so it is no wonder that people do not have high trust in Jiang Hai's wine. Even if Jiang Hai's wine is much better than the average red wine, they will not believe it too much. When a bottle of red wine is sold wholesale for $800, it will be sold for at least $900, and the choice of $900 is quite a lot. For example, in China, the wine made by a small workshop is better than Maotai Flying Heaven, but it is also sold for 1,000 renminbi. If the two wines are put together, what will you buy? So there is nothing to compare. Originally, Jiang Hai did not rely on this thing to make money, nor did he care too much about it. The one he cared about the most was Dulce Gerard. So, although he won an award last year and made some reputation, he came again this year to build up the reputation of this brand. In this regard, Jiang Hai naturally agreed with both hands. The other party is running to make money for him, so what is there to be dissatisfied with? So, as soon as he said that, Jiang Hai directly spent a lot of money. Go, all the expenses will be reimbursed. Stay in a 5-star hotel, and eat the best food. Old Dulles Gerard does not have it easy, so Jiang Hai naturally will not be stingy with this small amount of money. It is more a matter of attitude. Jiang Hai does not talk about other things, at least in terms of benefits, he is extremely generous. Just like what Dulles Gerard thought, this year's Magown wine competition is also tasted with the bottle covered. The wine in Jiang Hai's manner, whether it is 1 year old or 2 years old, tastes much better than ordinary wine. It is comparable to the best wine in the world. One can imagine how terrifying the wine that has been in the cellar for 5 years will be after it is taken out. Now that it is 2 years old, there is a faint hint that it is going to be the best. Last year, when it was awarded the gold medal, there was still a lot of discussion. This year, almost 70% of the people voted for Jiang Hai's wine. Winning the gold medal can be said to be deserved, and winning the gold medal for 2 years in a row has attracted the attention of some people. One of them is called Balian Mudun. This person is currently one of the largest distributors of red wine in Europe. After tasting Jiang Hai's wine and understanding the market, he is quite interested in Jiang Hai's wine. Therefore, he looked for Dulles Gerard and discussed with him about the European distribution rights of this wine. For this reason, he even said that he would raise the price by 15%. Of course, this price was raised by Dulles Gerard, and also by himself. Naturally, this price could still be raised. According to Dulles Gerard, it should be able to be raised by 20%. After a preliminary calculation of how much profit he would get if he raised the price by 20%, he immediately called Jiang Hai. This kind of business is tens of millions, or even hundreds of millions. He does not dare to make a decision for his boss. This is also the reason why Jiang Hai likes the people in his manner. They really know how to conduct themselves. Although Jiang Hai is a layman, they are just talking about the meaning. The person who really makes the decision is Jiang Hai. Facts have proven that they are right, because Jiang Hai is always able to create miracles. In an ordinary pasture, the beef he sold was the best. In an ordinary fishery, the seafood he sold was also the best. Who knew if an ordinary winery could create miracles? Chapter 1024. Sitting in the Rolls-Royce that Dulles Gerard specially rented from a 5-star hotel, Jiang Hai and the others arrived at the hotel. Dulles Gerard came by himself, but he stayed in a suite. This was also Jiang Hai's request. He was not short of money when he went out to do business. If he wanted to talk about business, it would be too embarrassing to rent a standard room. Therefore, no matter who it was, even if it was Eduard Anderson or Robbins Garcia, they all rented suites in 5-star hotels because they were not short of money. Jiang Hai naturally stayed in the presidential suite. This was to show off his strength, and also to show his strength. Before Jiang Hai came, Dulles Gerard had already booked a presidential suite. After Jiang Hai and the others arrived, they went straight up to rest. Knerson Peters was driven to Dulles Gerard's room by Jiang Hai, and the presidential suite was naturally occupied by Jiang Hai, Azalina, and Wallace Shelley. After the two entered, they did not say anything and scanned the surroundings to see if there were any bugs or cameras. After confirming that there were no problems, Jiang Hai and the others began to study the problem of meeting clients with ease. However, Jiang Hai and the others did not make an appointment tonight. First, Jiang Hai was a little tired after a day of flying. Second, they wanted to leave the other party hanging. They made an appointment at 10:00 tomorrow morning to talk about business. Since the wine competition in Marquette was over, Jiang Hai and the others did not need to go to Marquette anymore. They could just stay in Paris. In the afternoon, Jiang Hai and the two girls had a good rest together. Of course, no one knew whether they had taken advantage of each other or who had taken advantage of who. Anyway, nothing happened in the afternoon. In the evening, Jiang Hai and the others went out to eat. Jiang Hai didn't care much about his clothes or his car. First, it was easy to drive, and second, it looked good. He didn't really like those RVs or supercars. His body size was a bit too big. Even if he squeezed those supercars into his car, it wouldn't be comfortable. Therefore, there were very few supercars in his car. Basically, it was either some black technology car or his favorite SUV. Among them, there was no need to talk about the battle shield. However, compared to clothes, jewelry, and cars, Jiang Hai was very picky when it came to food. Of course, this was also a problem that he had developed in recent years after becoming rich. He used to eat everything. When you go to a country, you naturally have to eat the country's specialties, unless you can't accept this way of eating. For example, there were a lot of people in China who liked to eat insects. However, the highest limit that Jiang Hai could accept was silkworm pupae. It was not the small bee pupae, but the large silkworm pupae from the northeast. Other than that, he couldn't stand other insects. Oh, right, there was also the dragonfly that he roasted when he was young. In China, there are a lot of people who like to eat insects. I won't introduce many provinces here, lest people say that Jiang Hai is some kind of regional black or something. But it is true that insects are a very common delicacy in some provinces. There is even a street in a tourist city that basically sells insects, and people who go there to play will all try it. There were also a lot of people in the northeast who liked to eat insects. For a period of time, outside the food stalls and barbecue stalls in Jiang Hai's hometown, Bing City, there were insects everywhere. The big black beetle, also known as the water bug. Now, the more famous one was the legendary corpse bug. It was considered a close relative. There were also bees and silkworms. Some people also ate cockroaches, grasshoppers, scorpions, centipedes, etc. Because there were no insects in Bing City, bamboo worms from the south were very rare in the barbecue stalls in the northeast. The price was very high. When Jiang Hai was still in school, some of his classmates would bring these cooked insects to school as snacks. Of course, the main reason was to attract everyone's attention. After these insects were fried, they would sprinkle some 5-spice powder on it. It was just like fried peanuts. But Jiang Hai had never tried it. He really did not like to eat these things. In France, although French cuisine had always been the king of Western cuisine, there were still some things that Jiang Hai did not like to eat. For example, snails. Originally, Jiang Hai ate snails, conches, and other things. But the big white snails in France, he had no interest in them, because they don't cook them well. Compared to snails, foie gras and other things, he can also eat them. But what he ate tonight was a French snack called cheese hot pot. As the name suggested, it was similar to hot pot. It was cooked with a high degree of white wine and cheese. After the cheese was melted, some bread, vegetables, fruits, sausages, and slices of meat were put into the hot pot and cooked for a while before they were taken out to eat. It was very fragrant. Jiang Hai had eaten it the last time he was here. Now that he was here, he naturally wanted to taste it again. As for the white wine, it was brandy. Western countries also had different types of white wine. For example, Soviet Russia had vodka. Of course, Soviet Russia had vodka. Britain had whiskey, Cuba had rum, Mexico had tequila. Gin was produced in the Netherlands, but it was developed by the British. Of course, what was mentioned here were the main production areas and sources. Naturally, other countries also had their own. As for France, perhaps they were really fated with grapes. Their red wine was the best in the world, and their white wine, which was also known as brandy, was also one of the best in the world. At least, it was one of the most expensive ones. Just like the legendary XO and Louis XVI, which were known by everyone, were brandy. Among them, XO referred to the special grade brandy, so there were many of them every year. Louis XVI was a brand. Jiang Hai had no interest in these because he did not like to drink foreign wine. In the past, he was poor and could not afford to drink it. Now that he had money, he was not used to drinking it because he was not at the level of pretending to be cultured. Now, others had to pretend to be cultured to suit their taste. What was a successful person? That was it. When they arrived at a cheese hot pot restaurant, Jiang Hai and the others had a good meal. Because it was not far away, they did not need to drive. At about 8 p.m., Jiang Hai and the others returned to the hotel. Here, Jiang Hai also wanted to make it clear that when you are in Paris, don't go out at night. Among all the capitals of developed countries in the world, the security in Paris was the worst. It was the worst. Parisians, or to be exact, the French, were very chinibu. Anyway, no one in France looked at Jiang Hai, so he was not afraid of offending people. The British were arrogant. After all, they were an empire on which the sun never set. To put it bluntly, they were pretentious. It was the kind of feeling that when you see them talking, you want to beat them up. As for the French, to put it bluntly, they were elegant. After all, they were the capital of romance and art. To put it bluntly, they were chinibu. They belonged to the kind of people who would do whatever they wanted. Don't ask them why. They were artists. They had nothing to say to ordinary people like you. So you see, the French sometimes did things inexplicably. They did whatever they wanted without any stance or foundation. Just like when China held the Olympic Games, they slapped people's faces loudly. But after a few years, they would shamelessly move forward again. It was hard to say anything because their way of thinking was really hard to understand. Central and Eastern Europe had not been peaceful for the past few years, so all the countries had closed their doors. France had started to recruit refugees. Although it was a humanitarian matter, it had also offended the terrorists. If you recruited all the people, where would they find people to fight? In addition, among these refugees, many of them were not good people. So the crime rate in Paris was very high. It was precisely because of this that the local people in Paris did not go out at night. At night, it was very quiet. In addition, the terrorists had been mainly targeting France. After all, they had offended them, so they came from time to time. It was really a bit frightening. Jiang Hai's team was amazing. Their individual fighting strength was very strong. But they didn't need to get involved with these desperados, so after dinner, they returned to the hotel early. They didn't want to wander outside. Besides, there was nothing to see. Knowing that this place wasn't peaceful, the shop owners closed early. After returning to the hotel, Jiang Hai was ready to go back and watch TV for a while and rest. But when he walked into the lobby, he suddenly heard someone arguing there. He took a look and found that it was two people with black hair and yellow skin. They were talking at the front desk. The man had been arguing, and the woman was stopping him. Jiang Hai was not a meddlesome person. Even if the two people were Huaxia, Jiang Hai was not going to intervene. But when he saw the woman's appearance, he could not help but be stunned. Because this woman, he actually knew, Beauty Han. Looking at the woman, Jiang Hai could not help but raise his eyebrows. To be honest, there were many people who had sex with him in the past few years. Except for the people who lived in his house, he did not have many memories of them. But this woman, he remembered. This woman was not Huaxia, but a South Korean. Jiang Hai met her when he went to South Korea to pretend to be 13. Something very indescribable happened. Originally, he thought that after he left, he might not have any interaction with this woman in his life, but he did not expect to meet her again here. What would her expression be if she saw him? What's the situation over there? Jiang Hai grabbed a waiter and asked him. Chapter 10:25. Oh, it's like this. The two people over there are husband and wife. Sir said that they booked a room in our hotel on the website, but it's not available online. Looking at their appearance, they shouldn't be here to mess around. It's very likely that they were cheated by a travel agency or a fishing website. Hearing Jiang Hai's inquiry, the waiter here also said immediately. He knows Jiang Hai. He came in the hotel's Rolls-Royce and stayed in the presidential suite after coming in. Such a VIP is not someone he can afford to provoke. It seems that this person looks similar to the two guests over there. It is very likely that they are compatriots or something. Naturally, he won't care about it. If Jiang Hai knows that this guy recognizes him as a Korean, he doesn't know if he will let this guy know why the flowers are so red. Of course, if he wants to beat people, it is inevitable that he will say "Bakayalu" after beating people up. Even if it's shameful, he can't shame Huaxia's face, right? But fortunately, Jiang Hai doesn't have the ability to read minds. Forget it, I don't want to argue with you. Today is the day of my 11th wedding anniversary with my wife. I don't want to quarrel with you. Since I spent money in vain, then okay, we don't want that money. Now, give us a room. Just as Jiang Hai asked in the distance, the man here, the husband of the Korean woman, raised his hand and said with a serious face, then took out his bank card. This is France, not South Korea. His temper has to be restrained. Sorry, sir, our hotel store does not accept direct check-in. We only accept advance reservations and VIP customers. Of course, if you directly stay in a suite, then we can also handle it for you. After hearing the man's words, the front desk waiter here still had a good temper and still refused him with a smile. You are discriminating. You just don't want us to stay. I have money. What do you mean by this? Believe it or not, I will go to the embassy. But after hearing her words, the man here was going crazy. How can there be such a place? They are simply targeting me, and they only accept reservations? He has only heard of hotels that do not accept reservations. How can they only accept reservations? This guy is discriminating against me, these despicable French bastards. Sir, the requirements are all written here. There are English, French, Portuguese, Chinese, and Japanese. Hearing his roar, the receptionist sighed. In fact, she knew that she had offended this person when she said those words. I'm from South Korea. Why do I need to know English, Chinese, and Japanese? Why is there no South Korean language? This is blatant discrimination. After hearing the receptionist's words, the man became even more furious. Okay, Jingshuan, if we can't live here, we'll go somewhere else. Paris is so big, we don't have to live here. Looking at her husband who had gone berserk, Han Jiaran hugged him tightly. Although she was also very tired, it was obvious that now was not the time to throw a tantrum. Even a powerful dragon could not suppress a local snake, not to mention that they were not dragons. Go help them. Looking at the quarrel over there, Jiang Hai couldn't help but shake his head, then said to Dulles Gerard. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Dulles Gerard walked to the counter. Dulles Gerard was originally a Frenchman. Coupled with his aristocratic temperament and the financial resources to open 2 suites, as soon as he walked over, the people at the front desk nodded politely. Even the security guards in the distance slowed down their pace at this time. The two of you, do you want to check in? You really need to make a reservation here because this is a private hotel in France. Rooms are usually not sold to the public. Walking over, looking at the furious Yan Jingshuan and the helpless Han Jiaran, Dulles Gerard said with a smile, then in front of them, he took out a card from his body. If the two of you want to check in, I can help. Hearing Dulles Gerard's words, the two people here calmed down a little, then nodded politely, and then with the help of Dulles Gerard, they quickly went through the check-in procedures. Thank you so much, I don't know if I have the honor of treating you to a meal. After going through the check-in procedures, Yan Jingshuan looked at Dulles Gerard with a serious face and said, this really helped them a lot. You don't have to thank me, it was our family's Mr. Jiang who asked me to come and help the two of you. It's not easy to go out. Hearing his words, Dulles Gerard didn't take the credit, but glanced at Jiang Hai and the others behind him. Oh, that Mr. Jiang is Korean? When she saw Jiang Hai and the others standing there, the originally relieved Han Jiaran's pupils dilated in an instant. That figure, how could she be wrong? But her husband didn't notice that something was wrong with her, instead, he politely bowed to them, and Jiang Hai just nodded. Sorry, Mr. Jiang is from Huaxia. Since the two of you have already checked in, I wish the two of you an entertaining trip, goodbye. After seeing Jiang Hai nod and walk to the elevator, Dulles Gerard also said with a smile, then walked over. Everyone walked into the elevator together, watching the elevator door close. Han Jiaren was still a little confused. Boss, do you still have feelings for that big sister? Why are you so reluctant to let her go? In the elevator, Huali Shelley deliberately leaned over to Jiang Hai's side and whispered in his ear. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but pinch her butt. What nonsense are you talking about? Your boss, I, have been through thousands of flowers, but not a single leaf has touched me. Glancing at her, Jiang Hai said calmly. He has always believed in a principle: men can go out and have fun, but when they're done, they must remember to go home. Not touched? There are more than 20 people in the villa? But hearing what he said, Azalina began to tear him down. Ahem, I'm being kind, well, that's it. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai said a little unnaturally, but only the two of them laughed. As for Knerson Peters, he didn't understand. Dulles Gerard understood and pretended not to understand. He is quite loyal to his boss, and he knows what to do. On this side, Jiang Hai returned to his room to rest. On the other side, Han Jiaren and her husband, Yan Jingshuan, after going through the check-in procedures, also got the room card and then went to their own room. After entering, Ting Jingshuan was very happy. It was also his first time staying in this hotel. The reason why he booked this hotel online was that it looked very good on the internet. The room was very elegant, clean, and all the facilities were very complete. Although it was just an ordinary standard room, to be honest, the facilities here can be ranked among the top in a 5-star hotel. After taking out all the clothes and the luggage, he filled the jacuzzi in the bathroom with water. He wanted to take a good bath and wash away his fatigue. As for his wife, Han Jiaren didn't do anything at this time except for being a little dazed. Ever since she saw Jiang Hai, she was in a daze. She walked into the room and sat in front of the bed. She didn't know what to do. In addition to being in a daze, she was still in a daze. Until Ting Jingshuan finished his bath, she was still in a daze. Hey, what's wrong? I've finished showering. Why haven't you packed up yet? Aren't you going to take a shower? Looking at Han Jiaren, Yan Jingshuan asked with some doubts. Hearing his words, Han Jiaren reacted and immediately began to pack up her things. Oh, I was thinking about something just now. Let's just go and leave our daughter to my mother-in-law. I don't know how she is. While packing up, Han Jiaren lied, but he had to admit that her acting skills were very good. Don't worry, my mother raised me so well. Our daughter will be fine. But then again, why did the Huaxia guy help us today? Do you know him? While drying his hair, Yan Jingshuan asked with a puzzled face. Hearing his words, Han Jiaren, who was packing up, was also shocked. How is that possible? I haven't been to Huaxia. But after all, she is a well-known actress in South Korea. She suppressed her emotions almost instantly and said in a very peaceful tone. Although they are both actors, Yan Jingshuan didn't doubt it. That's true. The last time you went to Huaxia was many years ago. Are they our fans? After thinking for a while, Yan Jingshuan said excitedly, but Han Jiaren shook her head. Her husband is too optimistic. Doesn't he know that Huaxia is currently under a ban? South Korea's performing groups are not allowed to perform. How can there be any fans? But if he thinks so, then let him think so. She can't say anything more. I didn't expect our popularity to be so high, haha. After packing up her clothes, Han Jiaren walked into the bathroom while Yan Jingshuan was still daydreaming. After changing her clothes, she entered the bathtub that had been refilled with water and slowly sat down. Her mind kept flashing back to some indescribable bits and pieces. She didn't know whether the ending of seeing this guy this time was good or bad. She was really worried that some things would be exposed. It seems that I have to find a time to explain it to him. Biting her lips, Han Jiaren made a decision in her heart. Some things must be done decisively. Otherwise, it will only be messed up. She doesn't want to be messed up, so she can only be decisive. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.